again, direct, take two. Okay, so our topic for today is hematopoiesis. This is going to be part of our lecture series in hematology for you guys. Okay, so you can come to the end of the lecture. At the end of the lecture, you can revisit our discussions again and again. And basically, I always prepare an extra playlist for you guys. Okay, at the end of the lecture. All right, so let's begin with the first thing in our discussion: hematopoiesis. Definition: it's the process of blood formation. It requires several processes. Okay, so one of the processes, it starts with cell renewal, of course, proliferation, differentiation, and maturation. Now, we're not going to go and delve deep into this, but the first step, of course, is going to be cell renewal. And there are several. There's only one cell in the body that's capable of cell renewal, and that's stem cells. And they are also capable of proliferation, but not all. But it's not just stem cells. Okay, there's also other cells that proliferate. Proliferation basically means just multiplication, and then differentiation is from a stem cell. They become colony stimulating colony stimulating with the help of colony stimulating factors. They're going to differentiate into either CFUB or colony forming unit blasts. Basically, it's going to be either a myeloblast or a lymphoblast. So when you see CFU, that basically means colony forming unit. These things are going to be familiar. You guys are going to be familiarized with these terms, and because we're going to talk about it in depth later. And then maturation basically is the end product of hematopoiesis, whether it's a red blood cell, a specific white blood cell, or a platelet. Okay? So those are the things that we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you guys will be able to follow through. Okay? Another thing that we need to talk about is the the primary sites of hematopoiesis in the human body. In an adult, it's in the bone marrow. From fetus to infant, we're going to start from. Sorry, somebody sent me a message. Let me remove that interruption for you guys because I was so rudely interrupted. I'm going to say my same statement again. Okay, from fetus to infant, it's going to start with the yolk sac. So it's the as the body becomes it morphs from a single-celled sperm and egg cell. Okay, it gets implanted into the uterine wall, and then it matures. The cells divide several times, and it will form what we call blood islands. In the blood islands, we're going to call it the yolk sac. Okay, so from that earliest stage, the yolk sac stage is going to be the site of the yolk sac is going to be the site of hematopoiesis in what we call the blood islands. Okay, I didn't put a picture on it here because it's a little bit too yucky, and I suppose because we don't have basically because it's a review class only, we're not going to delve deep into it. But the next stage would be the liver, and then the last is of course the spleen. Okay, so from embryo to infant, we're going to start with yolk sac, liver, and the spleen. Okay, and once a person becomes an adult, or the final place where where hematopoiesis occurs is in the bone marrow. All right, clear? Joanna, is it clear for you? Okay, clear? Okay, all right. Very good. I'm just calling random people in the chat because maybe y'all are sleeping. All right? Okay, so this is the summary of what I've said. Now, there are three phases of hematopoiesis, of course. What are the three phases of hematopoiesis? You guys, I've always arranged my lectures in question forms because I want you guys to at least familiarize yourselves selves with with question format lectures, because you might encounter questions and, oh, okay, sir said there's the question is asking you phases of hematopoiesis. So you need to immediately know that immediately know the somebody sent something on the chat. Okay. Ang dami, ang daming chat. So later ko na siya papansinin, guys. Terribly sorry. All right. So when the question is going to ask you phases of hematopoiesis, okay, so it means immediately you're going to say, okay, you need to deduce that there's only three of those phases. Maybe one of them is not included. So I'm going to exclude which one. So for example, we have what we call the mesoblastic stage, hepatic stage, and the medullary phase, okay? Or the hepatic phase and medullary phase. So from mesoblastic or the yolk sac phase, and then hepatic stage, and then the medullary phase. Now, sir, you might be Francis, you might be asking, there's no spleen. You're making you lie. You might be asking. You might say, oh, you lie. No, I'm not lying. The hepatic stage is, of course, it's a phase. All right. So there are some cases that the liver in some patients is not working, and there's certain stem cells or hematopoietic stem cells that are available as the child keeps growing, or as an infant grows. The spleen is going to be the primary source but it's not actually a phase. It's not considered as a phase. All right. So I'm not lying, but these are the three stages. So again, this might be a question. Might put a star on it there, here and there. Okay, you might need to put a star on that question. All right. Now, when does the mesoblastic phase of hematopoiesis begin? It's actually in the 19th day of embryonic development. So I mentioned earlier, once an embryo starts developing, we just count a couple of days, and then blood islands will form. And in those blood islands, within that yolk sac, you're going to see hematopoietic stem cells. So as early as 19 days of embryonic development, you're going to see blood islands form in the yolk sac. Okay? Now, the origin of the progenitor cells in the yolk sac phase of hematopoiesis is, of course, found in what we call the mesenchymal origin. All right, mesenchymal origin, and these progenitor cells form what you call the hematopoietic stem cells, or HSCs. All right. So from this day forward, from this slide onward, I'm going to refer to hematopoietic stem cells as HSCs. All right. So if you're not listening, you might not be able to catch up onto that. So please, when I say HSC, you're going to remind yourselves that, okay, sir is talking about hematopoietic stem cells. All right? Okay ba 'yon? Ano? Okay ba 'yon? Reniel? Carrie ba? Carrie? All right. Alright, so walang sumasagot. Maybe I got disconnected, maybe not. I don't know. Alright, what about Joanna Baltar? Okay ba yun sa'yo, Joanna Baltar?
Yes po.
Very good. Okay, she is not having it today. Alright. Okay, so question. Um, question. Ay, mamaya na pala. Wala pa pala tayo dun sa slide na yun. Let me move on with our discussion. Medyo mabilis ang pacing because this is a topic that is maybe 2 or 3 questions will be given to you in your board exam related to hematopoiesis. Okay, so that's why I'm starting the pace of the question. So what is the origin? It's basically in mesenchymal, or it's in the mesenchymal origin. or mesenchymal location of the yolk sac. Okay. All right. Now let's going to talk about what part of the embryo. All right. What part of the embryo? Basically, it's going to start as what we call the AGMN region. All right. So if you are well versed in biology, you're going to have a topic of embryology, and there's what you call the AGMN region. It's the aorta gonado mesonephros region. All right. So I'm being specific, but it is the location of your blood islands. Okay. All right. Next, progenitor cells finally migrate to the yolk sac. They form what you call primitive erythroblasts. And that's what I keep on referring to. And these are structures that we call, these embryonic structures are called blood islands. Okay? So they form the primitive erythroblasts. So basically, they're cells that have already what? Proliferated or differentiated? Anybody here can tell me the difference between proliferation and differentiation? Anybody? Ooh, quiet, quiet, quiet. People are quiet on the chat. What's the difference between proliferation and differentiation? We're going to stop here.
Reward daw muna, sir, bago sumunod.
Ayan tayo eh. Kakastart pa lang ng lecture natin. Wala pa nga 15 minutes. Reward ka agad, no, Sir Marco? Anong kaguluhan to? Kailangan ng motivation. O sige, maghuhubad. Charot, hindi ako maghuhubad. Charot lang. Charot lang. Kakanta ako. Charot. Charot lang. Ang pangit ng mga reward ko ngayon. No? Hindi very generous, sir. Kasi, proliferation po yung nag-multiply ang cells. Alright, what about differentiation? Charisse, I don't like chatting when I'm asking questions. Can you open your microphone and say it to me? And I think it's a requirement for you guys. Parang hindi kasi nabanggit ata sa parang I think requirement siya na meron kang microphone, Sir Marco, when you're attending online classes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so Charisse, gusto ko marinig ang lovely voice mo. I wanna hear your
Sir,
voice.
pag proliferation po yung mag-multiply po yung cell o mag-increase po yung cell number po. Tapos pag differentiation po, doon na po yung magbabago yung morphology po. Like, differentiation between lymphocyte tsaka monocyte, ganun po.
Ayun, bonggang-bongga. I love it. So for example, thank you so much for answering that question. Thank you. Now we're going to move on with another student. Okay, I want you guys to think like hematologists this time. So medyo close tayo at work na. Unlike last time, we're going to think like lawyers, all right? So this time, I want you guys to think as hematologists. So for example, are all cells capable of differentiation? True or false? It's a question. It's a true or false question. I want to hear everybody from the chat. Are all hematologic cells capable of differentiation, and are all capable of proliferation? It's a question that actually popped up in my ASCP exam. And I would like to see if people are actually aware of this thing. Are all cells capable of proliferation first? True or false lang? Short question. Kita mo Sir Marco, listening. We have what you call listening, We have a listening. If you guys want to work in the United States, you guys need to take the IELTS exam, and one of the requirements is listening. Somebody said in the chat, yes. I asked the question. See, I am actually also a coach in an IELTS class. Okay, so if you guys forgot, you will not be allowed to do changed. Ang maldita ko today, no? Somebody said yes. So, but the question is asking you true or false. Okay? So, guys, if you guys want to work somewhere around in a Western country, you guys need to follow instructions. Okay? and read things carefully. Sino yung sumagot ng yes? At Adrian, ikaw. Ay, naku, Adrian.
Sir, let me explain.
Oh, ano, sige. True or false ang question. O, sige, please, explain yourself.
Tapos saktong na-type ko na po yung yes. Tapos bigla niyo po nasabi na
Alright.
true or
So, classmates, pwede ba natin pagtulungan si Adrian?
Sir, yun din po sagot
In,
ko.
in fairness kay Alisa, binago naman niya. In fairness kay Alisa. At least si Joanna nag-sorry na sila agad. Alright, so guys, listening. We're talking about listening. But akala ko mag-ano lang tayo dito, guys. Kayo talaga pinaglololoko nyo talaga ako, guys, ha. Pero gusto ko yan. Natutuwa ako kasi ngayon pa lang nako-correct na natin yung mga dapat makorek, no? So the question is proliferation. RBCs natin pwedeng mag-proliferate. Hoy, that is considered as a malignancy, no? There might be a problem with our cells, or with our progenitor cells. Imagine your RBCs are capable, your red blood cells proliferating. That is considered as malignancy. Okay? So not all cells in the body not all cells are capable. Not all cells in a normally would not be able to proliferate. Okay? Hematology. I'm talking about cells in hematology. Okay? The cells that I'm thinking of is in hematology. So okay? So please be mindful of those things. Okay? All right? So the correct answer is false, okay? So not all cells are capable, not all cells under normal circumstances. Medyo mali yung phrasing ko ng question, pero I think everybody got the idea. Everybody who answered false got the idea. Okay? All right? Now differentiation are all cells capable of differentiation? Again, it's the same banana. It's a question under the same banana. Okay? Or under the same umbrella. There are select cells that are capable of morphing into either monocytes. Okay? So you need to be mindful of these things. All right? So keep in mind those things, okay? Because if something happens, all right, if there's a problem with differentiation, this is what you call this dysplasia. This is what we call a dysplasia. All right? So we're going to talk about that when we move to the discussion of leukemia. Okay? Clear? Is everybody clear with that one, or do you need me to clarify? Adrian, sir, I changed my answer. Naku talaga ha, Adrian, humanda ka talaga sa akin, ha? All right. Capital, Joanna, hindi ka naman galit. All caps lahat. Hindi ka naman galit, Joanna. All caps lahat. Okay. No, ini-adjust ko lang ulit kayo. Ini-adjust ko lang kayo, guys, ha? Gusto ko kasi, I want the discussion to be fun and lively for you guys. I want because these are questions that are oftentimes this is a topic that can get a little too boring if the delivery is I don't know, if I just read everything for you guys, right? So what cells are found in the yolk sac? Of course, there are several cells that you're going to find in the yolk sac. Fetal RBCs are one of them, or what you call the primitive erythroblasts, and of course, your angioblasts. Okay, in the yolk sac, specifically in the yolk sac, you're going to find primitive erythroblasts and angioblasts. So why is it important in the discussion? Why is angioblast important? Because they form fetal blood vessels. Okay, angioblast and primitive erythroblasts, they serve as the building blocks of what you need in the human body as the baby grows, all right, or as the baby develops further in its life, in its lifespan. All right, now let's talk about a certain trivia question. In the fetal blood islands, what analytes can be measured? O, diba? Bongga ang question na to. In the fetal blood islands, what analytes can we measure? Alright? Pwede na ba ako mag-harvest ng, look at this, this slide for a while, and then I'll give you guys a minute to ponder on what analyte can we measure. Okay? I want you to look at this slide, and then I'll give you guys a minute to gather your thoughts on the specifics of whatever. Wait. Okay. So we're still working. We're still going on. The live stream is still going on. All right. So I want you guys to ponder what do you think forms, what analyte can we measure with, buti na lang hindi ko napindot. Alright? Kasi baka maano. Kaya hindi ko pa sinishare yung what do you call this? Yung PowerPoint presentation, because I want you guys to think critically. I want to stimulate your brains. Alright? So I want you to focus on this one. What specific analyte in routine CBC or in hematology can we measure? Alright? So for example, I were to harvest these cells. Okay? What can I measure? Fetal RBCs, primitive erythroblasts. What do you think? What analyte can I measure? This is the question for this trivia question. Okay? Anybody? Alyssa Faith Baptista. I thought it was hemoglobin.
Yes,
All right. Why did you say hemoglobin? You can answer me directly. You can answer me in a very sassy way. Don't worry. I want you guys to answer me in very sassy, a very yes queen answer. Why did you say hemoglobin? Oh, bonggang-bongga. Oh, may goer 1, goer 2 pang nalalaman si Adrian. Diba? I want you to. Bakit hemoglobin? Why did you say hemoglobin? Ano po?
Sir, hindi po kasi yung sagot po ni Adi, sabi ko po, pinapahirapan niya po yung buhay ko.
Alright, so why did you say? Mamaya natin pag-usapan yon. Ito pa nga lang, oh. What, in the fetal blood islands, what analyte can be measured? Why did you say hemoglobin? Oh, nilagyan ko na ng star.
Sir, si Adi na lang.
No, I'm asking you, kasi lagi ko, ko na nga yan, moderator ko na nga yan, si Adrian. I want to hear more from you guys. Okay? Why did you say, all right, so ano na, pagod ka na, nahirapan ka na. Okay, let's move on with Jeriza Baltazar. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for letting me hear your lovely voice. Now we're going to move on with our next caller. Next caller talaga, no? All right, Jeriza Baltazar. I want to know what goes in your brain. Why did you answer hemoglobin? Because again, what I'm asking you guys to do here is think critically. It's just a little bit of an exercise, all right? Jerisa is kind of ignoring me. I feel a little sad because I'm getting ignored. Involved in. Yeah, I know what you want to say. I don't want to hear it I don't want to see it in the chat. I want to hear your voice, girl. Pero walang typographical errors. 'Di ba? Oh, ito si Eleanor Tomas. Okay, Eleanor Tomas, you were correcting yourself you were correcting your spelling. I want to hear your voice, Eleanor Tomas. Okay? Please open your camera. Camera and ano talaga. Open your microphone and I want to hear why you answered hemoglobin. Ang arte ko mo no, hemoglobin talaga. Hindi pwedeng hemoglobin lang. Alright, Eleanor, why did you say hemoglobin?
I think, sir, it's screen the variety of disorder.
That doesn't really answer the question. Or why did you answer? Right? I'm asking you the question, why did you answer hemoglobin? We're not talking about disorders yet. Girl, masyado tayong advanced ha. Ikaw talaga. Pero I like your way of thinking. Okay, you want to screen. Alright. Okay, Adrian. Si Adrian na. Baka sabihin kasi may favoritism ako eh. Alright, Adrian.
Yes, sir.
Bakit, ano namang pumasok sa utak mo? Bakit mo sinabing goer 1, goer 2, or Portland? Ano ang parasite? Charot, parasite talaga.
Class Hema 1 pa lang to. Huwag niyo masyadong laliman yung...
Oo.
Mali po ba, sir?
Hindi naman mali. Tinatanong ko lang, bakit mo sinabing goer 1, goer 2, and goer
Yung
Portland?
naalala ko before, sir. Na,
Okay.
po sa mesoblastic stage po. Doon sa, kumbaga yun yung parang nade-detect.
O diba?
Sa,
That is what I'm asking. Yes, thank you so much. O diba? Very direct ang answer, no? Ay, kasi yun sir nakikita. Kasi nga kaya ako nga nilagyan ng ng highlight. Very good, Adrian. Thank you so much. And that's the kind of energy I'm expecting from you guys, ha? Because at the end of the lecture, you guys are going to participate in another tomorrow maybe. You guys are going to participate in another quiz show sponsored by me. O, diba? Merong marireceive na reward ang taong makakakuha ng highest because the next time we meet, alam na ba nila, Sir Marco? Alam na ba nila na ako na buong hema nila? Baka mamaya niya nagmamagaling ako. Okay, so alam na nila. Wala nang surprises. Kasi sabi, hinahanap daw ako ni Raiden Ai. Charot. ang unang message kasi sa akin ni Sir Marco kaninang umaga. Ay, kaninang 4:30. Ay, anong oras ba dito sa Kaninang 9 o'clock, sorry. Hinahanap ka ni anyway, na naman tayo sa mga characters na nilalaro ko. But anyway, that's it. That's the correct answer, Adrian. Thank you so much. And we're going to talk about that. These are actually what Adrian said, goer 1, goer 2, and Portland is actually what you call embryonic hemoglobins. All right? Okay? So the correct answer is hemoglobin. Okay? So, how do we measure it in the fetal blood islands? Well, you don't do it on humans first, of course. When you're trying to experiment, you're going to start first with animal studies, of course. All right? Because everybody, any living organism here in the world will follow the same biological dogma. They usually start either as an embryo, whether even if it was a chicken on an egg, it will form an embryo. Yun nga yung ini-enjoy nating mga balot, 'di ba? Same din ang process ng pag-mature. So whether it be human, whether it be a monkey, whether it be a fish, or no, not fish, because they have a different biology. Anything that walks on land na lang, just to be on the safe side. Jeriza Baltasar said, "Malat po, sir. Malat po, sir. May sore." Okay. All right. So ayan na naman tayo. Okay, so guys, patay tayo diyan. All right. So we're going to move on with embryonic hemoglobins, because we don't want to correct people in all right. Anyway, let's move on. Embryonic hemoglobins. All right. So that is what Adrian said. Basically, you're going to have goer 1, goer 2, and hemoglobin Portland. Ang arte ko talaga, no? Can somebody pronounce hemoglobin for me the way I pronounce it? Maybe may pasalubong sa akin because I'm going back to the Philippines in a couple of weeks. Kids, pronunciation exercise lang. Adrian, can you start off our pronunciation exercise? Wala lang, trip ko lang.
Hemoglobin.
Ang arte, hindi ganun ka-arte. Okay, let's go with Reniel kasi hindi ko naririnig ang voice ni Reniel today. And you know naman, kalaro ko yan si Reniel. Reniel. Hoy, Reniel. Hindi pwedeng sira. Meron kang built-in, tigilan mo ako, Reniel, ha? Meron kang built-in microphone. Meron ka ding cellphone. Hemoglobin. Ang arte, change device po. Mag-change device ka, ha? Mamaya kita tatanungin ulit. Alright? What about one from the girls? What about Mayra? I have not seen Mayra today. She didn't even say good morning. That's a little bit rude, Mayra. Alright?
Good morning, sir.
That's a little bit rude, Mayra. You didn't even say good morning to me. I mean, come on, girl. You did say good morning. Okay. Wala lang. I'm just confirming. Anyway, can you help me? Can you say the word in the chat? Can you say this word that I highlighted? Wala lang. Baka mamaya may makaano. No. Unfortunately, wala talaga. What about Cesar Makatulad? Labis ko na din to si Cesar Makatulad. Ayan yung mga lagi ko mga tinatanong. Cesar. Nako, wala din. Hindi sila active talaga, no? Kahit na in-include ko, Sir Marco, yung word na pasalubong. Wala talagang ano. Sige na, bahala kayo dyan. Sige.
Malulungkot ata itong mga to kasi nag-release na naman ako ng score ng Histopath.
Ay, nako. Bakit hindi? Ay, oo nga. Hindi natin napag-usapan yung ano, ha? Wawarlahin ko kayo. Hindi na daw nila i-contest. Wawarlahin ko kayo. Nako. Hindi na sila magko-contest. Kasi I love confrontations. I love confrontations. You know why? Because it stimulates a energized discussion. And you guys get a clearer picture of where I'm coming from and what the question is asking you from. So guys, if you have any question, you can raise it to me. Okay? There is actually every time I release questions for medtech laws, students would often would often contest it. But most of the time I always win by the technicalities. You know why, sir? Because I like playing with words. And your words can be used against you in terms of questioning. So hindi na nila i-contest because I got a text from Adrian saying that you guys are contesting it, and then you guys have he sent me a picture of I don't know if it was a lecture of but yeah, nakalimutan ko yun pala dapat ang pang-entrada ko, Sir Marco. No, pang warla pala ang una kong entrada. Nakalimutan ko. Because I was having...
Yun din yung binungad nila. Hindi po namin i-contest.
Natakot. Huwag kayong matakot sa akin. It's okay for me to ask. It's okay for you guys to question. Even me. Okay? Even me. I am not perfect. But at the same time, you gotta be able to provide me with an educational with an educated answer. If you're going to contest the question to me, it has to be educated. You have to provide proof. It has to be objective. We cannot be personal. All right? And luckily for you, most of the questions that I will be asking will now be factual. Well, it will not be case-to-case basis, just like Tagagaso clinics. Natuwa ka doon, Mayra, sa mga example ko. I'm manifesting that you are going to have a merger. Natuwa ka doon, no? Natuwa din ako doon whilst I was thinking, I want to make a Gagaso. I want her to make Gagaso clinic. She's not gonna marry. Ganun yung ano ko. Ang pangit ng fortune telling ko sa'yo. She's not going to marry. She's going to be single, but she's going to have a successful career as as the CEO of Gagaso Clinics. O, di ba? Ang pangit ng ano ko, ang pangit ng foreshadowing ko sa future mo. But I suppose my foreshadowing would be for the better because, girl, everybody wants to be rich, right? All right? Now, continuing on with our discussion of embryonic hemoglobins, o, diba? I'm asking somebody to say hemoglobin kasi I want you guys to have the same level of panache like me. Poshness talaga. Alright? So we're going to go on with the globin structures for each of the following globin chains. So goer 1, I'm going to give you a mnemonic, so I hope you guys will remember this because this has been passed throughout the ages. Alright? Hemoglobin Portland. Okay? Alright? So the first one that we're going to have is hemoglobin. Wait, hang on a sec. What happened to my computer? Okay. Alright, so the first one that you're going to have is GES. Alright? What's GES? Bakit sinulat mo, Sir, GES? Because this one, hemoglobin goer 1 has epsilon and zeta chains. Epsilon and zeta chains. Alright? The other one is gay. Why do you mean gay? Alright? Why did I act like that? Because it has alpha and epsilon chains. Alright? And hemoglobin Portland, zeta, and gamma chains. Pazag. O diba ang arte? Ges, gay, and pazag. O diba yun yung it's been passed down through the ages. So hopefully you guys will know and remember these embryonic hemoglobins. Alright, so this is the answer to your question. Alright, so ito yung mnemonic ko, GES, gay, and ZEG. Alright, hemoglobin Portland. Actually, when I was taking the board exam, I was so scared that this is one of the questions that they might ask us in the board exam. So I immediately wrote, when I received the paper for hematology, I wrote this specific mnemonic. Unfortunately, the question didn't appear in the board exam. So, I felt a little silly. Okay? So, basics muna tayo, guys. Alright. Now, what is the term used for hematopoiesis that occurs in the mesoblastic stage? This is what you call the primitive hematopoiesis. It's called primitive because there is really it occurs intravascularly. With developing blood vessels. Remember earlier I mentioned angioblasts, which are responsible for primitive blood vessels. Alright? Inside they grow together. Alright? As the blood vessels develop, the erythroblasts actually grow inside the cells, inside the walls of the blood vessels. So intravascular. So it's quite a fascinating feature of hematopoiesis because most of the time you're going to expect things that they're growing inside the organs. But in primitive hematopoiesis, it occurs intravascularly as the angioblasts allow the growth of allow the development of the primitive blood vessels, or the start, or what you call the starter pack, kumbaga, ng mga ng mga blood vessels natin. All right? Now, when does the hepatic stage of hematopoiesis occur? It occurs 4 to 5 weeks of gestation and it ends at 1 to 2 weeks after birth. So, sir, totoo ba? Bakit ganon? All right? Kasi as the baby goes out of the mother's womb, it's going to rely on oxygen more from the outside world. Okay? So it's no longer reliant on its own blood, it's no longer reliant on, it means that it's shifting from primitive hematopoiesis to hepatic stage hematopoiesis. All right? And then when one goes out of the womb into the outside world, ika nga, when we want to talk about it in a very Pinoy Big Brother kind of way, that's what we're going to expect. Okay? 1 to 2 weeks after birth. Okay? 1 to 2 weeks after birth. Now, question, when does splenic when does the splenic production of blood vessels occur? Kasi wala naman tayong stages na pinag-usapan. When the hepatic stages is impeded, okay, in certain disease states. All right? So not everyone is blessed to have a fully functional liver at birth. So sometimes the body compensates by allowing primitive cells from the spleen to grow. Okay? So kaya doon papasok yung, sir, you lying. Maybe Francis will ask me in the same tone and accent, sir, you lying. I thought you said it's only just the hepatic stage and in the medullary stage. Where's the splenic stage, right? In context, you have to look at it. You have to look at everything. Is the patient normal? All right. So we're going to discuss that in the next few chapters of our discussion, and you're going to see why some patients rely on either extramedullary hematopoiesis. All right. Now the term is extramedullary. All right. Now, what are the precursor cells that begin in the hepatic stages or in the hepatic phase? We have erythroid, monocytic, and granulocytic. All right. Where is the platelets? All right. Where is the platelets? Well, we're going to talk about that when we go to the maturation series. But I want to make things. I want you guys to keep things simple. Everything needs to be simple. For now, erythroid, monocytic, and granulocytic precursors. So if you see CFUE, that means it's a colony forming unit. That is the primitive cells for erythroid precursor. CFUM, you're going to see CFUGM, GM. That means that it's monocytic or granulocytic in nature. All right? So clear? All right? CFUM. So CFU is basically a stem cell that it's originally a stem cell that differentiated into another stem cell to become precursor cells. All right? Cool beans. All right? We can move on. Lymphoid blood cells. All right? So your lymphocytes develop in the fetus, or in what parts of the fetus? So B cells and T cells actually grow from different stages in the hepatic stage. Now, contrary to the name of the stage or the hepatic phase, is actually different. It actually grows in the production of these cells actually come from the liver for B cells and kidneys. Remember, we're still at the extramedullary phases. Therefore, it's not yet in the bone marrow. Now, if you discussed it in the context of immunology, you're going to say, sir, again, you lying. Maybe Adrian will say it in the same accent. Sir, why are you lying to us? Now, we're going to talk about it in the hematology sense. We're at the very beginning stages. Remember, hepatic stages. All right? The assumption when you discuss it in immunology, it is in the assumption that you are discussing it in the assumption that the patient is an adult. But this time, we're talking about it when the patient is still either a fetus or a newborn. All right? Because this is the middle path. The hepatic phase is the middle path of hematopoiesis. There's a middle way between primitive and adult hematopoiesis. Then we want to clear the air out for you guys. All right. So for B cells, it's in the liver and in the kidneys. For T lymphocytes, it's in the thymus. Okay. Now, advanced question na tayo. We're going to go several pages from our slides. What is the difference of T lymphocytes based on CD markers? O, diba? Kasi I remember you guys they already took immunology in their third years. Nobody would be here in the chat or in the Zoom, not a Zoom meeting. This is a Google Meet class if you've not passed your immunology classes. Now, what is the difference between T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes in terms of CD markers? Ayan na naman, nakalimutan. Ayan. These are remember, the questions that I'm asking you are one of the are questions that you might expect to have in the board exam. If you don't know this, you might have an inkling of a chance to pass the exam. Inkling meaning there's a small percentage of that, because these are must know and questions. All right? What is the difference? Charis. Ay, wala. Wala ang mga tao. Mayra, what's the difference between B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes? You can use Google, don't worry. Sa
Yung
yes.
T po, ano,
Yeah, okay.
humor cells.
Huh? Okay, CD markers muna. Oy, listening. Remember, listening. CD markers ang pinag-uusapan natin. In terms of CD markers. Mamaya na yung humoral immunity na yan. Meron pa kayong nalala. Advance ka talaga mag-isip, Mayra. Saka na yon. Ang question ko is, what's the difference between them in terms of CD? CD markers.
CD34.
CD34? Over? Ang dami naman. Over naman.
CD4.
Alright, sino si CD4?
T cells.
Okay. Sino si ano naman si B cells? Naku, nakalimutan na. Alright, next contestant. Huwag niyong kakalimutan yan ang pinaka-important. Pagka nag-aral kayo ng hematology, there will be questions in the exam that's going to say, I remember I created a question for my students last semester, Miss Patulak's class. It was a case presentation. Student, you are working as a lab assistant in a flow cytometry lab. The percentage indicate what cells is predominant in the patient's flow cytometry report, given the following results: 95% CD4 positive cells, 5% CD8 positive cells. Which of the following cells are predominant in the patient sample, in the patient's cell, using a Ficol-Hypake solution? That is one of my questions for them. And majority of the students were not able to answer correctly. Now again, class, you might be presented with case presentations. If you don't know the basics, you might as well go back again and study over what you need to remember. Because if you don't know that B cells are CD8 positive cells, you might have a difficult time, not just in hematology, but also in immunology and serology. Okay? So these are your CD markers. Okay? So thank you, Jenny Zabat, for providing us with the answer. All right? Okay. Now let's move on. When does the medullary phase of hematopoiesis start? Well, obviously, it starts after the end of the hepatic stage, of course. It's on the 5th month of fetal development. All right? Fetal development. So, sir, can the hematopoiesis occur concurrently? These stages can occur concurrently. Like for example, I started in the yolk sac phase, and then the baby grew organs already. So can we start it? Can we have blood ions? Of course, yes. They can overlap. All right, they can overlap. This is actually what it looks like in the books, and I summarized it for you guys. So this is what it looks like in the books. You're going to have age. You're going to have here the graph. One line starts for the yolk sac phase, another line starts for the medullary phase, and for the mesoblastic stage, and the last one is for the medullary phase. If you can see, they overlap with each other. Let me change the color. Right? Yes. So it doesn't mean that one thing ends then the other one starts. No, it's not like that. Human body is much more intricate and much more complicated than that. All right, it's not like a computer. Like for example, you're playing a particular game and you have to close the previous game that you're playing in order for you to fully get fully get the experience of immersing yourself in a different game. No, it's not like that. You can't just turn off a switch. There has to be like there has to be some sort of a buffer zone wherein both stages meet at one point, and then the production of cells from one set of organs decline, whilst the other organ production of cells increase in hematopoietic activity. So be mindful of that one. So the human body is not very straightforward. Medyo complicated siya. Okay? Now, fifth month of the fetal development. So after birth, how many months does it take for the bone marrow to become the primary site of hematopoiesis? So it's going to be at the 7th month of life. All right? So do I need to remember this, sir? Well, it's a bit of a yes and a no question, because I have experienced several of my previous students before. They would share recall questions to us. One of the questions was, I know it sounds like a rare question, but it is still asked in the board exam, even if it doesn't look like a must know question. So if you already know the basics, why not challenge yourself in knowing the uncommonly asked questions? All right. So it's a bit of a yes and no for me. Most of the time they would ask this. I'm 100% sure they might ask this in questions related in the PAMIT quiz show, but it gets rarely asked in the board exam. So in my humble and my professional opinion, if you want to pass your exams, you might as well study when these things are occurring in the human body, because it does sound like memory work, but overall the whole course, if you're not yet familiar with it, is that everything that we study here in medical technology, when you take the BS medical technology course, is going to be a lot of memory work. Okay, so you already have an inkling of what you might expect looking at your subjects. All right, so hematopoietic factors that are present, all right, in the serum. All right, so I want somebody to help me out here. I haven't heard from Francis from today, starting at the beginning of the class. So I'm going to call out Francis, and let me see if he is actually listening to our lecture at the beginning. I want to see if he's listening in our lecture. What are these things? These are stimulants. They stimulate hematopoietic activity, and I want Francis to transcribe it for me, if we can. Where's Francis Alipio? Hello?
Here. Hello.
All right. Now, let's start with EPO first, because this is the easiest. This is, again, a hematopoietic factor. All right? That is present in the serum at the start of the medullary phase. What is EPO? I'll give you a clue.
Erythropoietin.
Oh, okay. So you don't need a clue. All right. Very good. That's what I like it. That's what I like about you. You don't need clues. All right. What about GM-CSF? Please transcribe it for me, because you'll get an idea of what cells this stimulates in its production. GM-CSF. Transcribe GM-CSF? That's the question. Okay, suddenly Francis.
Dinamit ko po yung sir, yung sa mouse po na back button. Sabi ko.
Okay. All right. So what? Do we know the question? All right. So do we know the answer? Can we transcribe it? Cerebrospinal fluid? No. I mentioned
Oy!
earlier.
Ay, so sorry.
Siri. Nagagalit si Nagagalit si Sir Marco.
That's it.
We My God, you've
Nabanggit na ni Sir Manuel yan kanina.
Yeah.
Opo, granulocyte macro fudge colony stimulating.
Nagagalit si Sir Marco, oh. Pero violent reaction si Sir Marco. He is extremely disappointed, Francis. He is furious.
Bakit cerebrospinal fluid?
And
Class
yung,
nasa
good
hematology
vibes
class.
lang. Oh, but, granulocyte, ano po, macro fudge colony stimulating factor.
All right. Okay, so actually it's a little bit wrong in the M, but it's actually granulocytic monocytic
Ay,
colony stimulating factor. And then GCSF is basically just a granulocytic monocytic. But anyway, you're partially correct. Maybe next time that you're going to be asked the question, you will be able to fully answer it correctly. Okay, partially correct. Would I accept it? Okay, sure. You'll get 0.5 from a question probably. And it just revealed how much disappointment Francis has given Sir Marco today.
my apologies po, Sir Marco. I'll do better.
Because he expects things. He expects you guys to know this. All right? He expects you guys to know this because I've mentioned it early on in our discussion. If you've not yet mentioned, if I may be so blunt, I've mentioned it several times earlier. Okay, so I was just checking if you guys are listening. But thank you, Francis. Have a nice day. All right, let's move on. What hemoglobins are present in the serum of patients who have in the medullary phase in the medullary phase? So there are 3 hemoglobins that are present in the medullary phase, and we're going to go and answer that one immediately. HbF, okay? All right. HbA1, all right? And HbA2, all right? We're going to discuss the difference between A1 and A2 in a little while, but let's begin with HbF, fetal hemoglobin. And can you guys tell me why is it important for us to know HbF? Can you give me one reason why it's important? It's an important analyte in the laboratory. General question. Anybody? Critical thinking skills again. Mhm.
Sir, fetal hemoglobin
Ayan na.
po siya, sir.
Oo. O ano nga? What I'm asking is, what is the clinical importance of knowing the number or the amount of fetal hemoglobin in one's serum or blood sample? That's my question. What's the clinical importance? There's a lot of things, but just give me one. Okay? Just give me one. There's a lot of important. It's important in a lot of things, but just give me one. I'll accept one. Anybody? Why do I need to know? Ano po, Mayra? Medyo putol-putol?
Ay, so, yung sa oxygen, sir.
Uh-huh. All right. Okay. It's a little bit vague, but okay. Yeah, okay. Oxygenation, yes. Obviously, HbA1 has more oxygen affinity than HbF, so I'm going to accept that. All right. Okay, what else? What else? Think outside the box. Think outside the realms of hematology. When have you heard HbF several times? It appears in what? In blood banking. It appears in analysis of urine and body fluids. But why is it important that we need to know the presence of this? Okay? Remember,
Sir, yan sa mga sickle anemia.
no. Sorry, Mera.
Okay lang.
All right. Ayan na, bumabawi na si Francis, Sir Marco. Sandali, isa-isa lang. Charis, sandali lang. Sumagot ka na, Charis. Sasakaling kita, Charis, ha? Charat lang. Francis, sige. Alexis, wait. Chill ka lang. Alright, Francis.
Sinunod ko po yung ano, sir.
Ano ba talaga? Akala ko pa naman. Ano ba yan? Alright. Alexis. You are raising your hand, Alexis. Alright, what do you want?
Sir?
Yeah, you were raising your hand.
Baka para ma-detect po yung hemoglobinopathies and anemia, yung alpha thalassemia and beta thalassemia.
All right, that's good. That's good. Oh, see, we're using very good. See, we're using our brains right now. We're critically thinking right now. I love it. Thank you, Alexis. It's a very vague answer again, but let me help you out. In patients with thalassemia, all right, patients with thalassemia, they often have a problem with their globin chain structures, and most of the time the body would compensate by increasing the number of hemoglobin F structures. So yes, that is actually correct. Okay, another one. Adrian raised his hand. Okay, another one.
Sir, ano po, to quantify the amount of fetal blood in the mother po.
Very good. That's another one.
Exactly how our med kit test po.
Very good. So, oh my gosh, so you guys are actually using your critical thinking caps now. My gosh, I am very proud of you guys. Sir Marco might be a little bit disappointed, but I'm a little excited with what you guys are trying to get that same level of energy when you're answering the exams, okay? Instead of contesting my questions. Shady. I know. The shade, sir. The shade. Ang shady mo, sir. Alright? So, yeah. Alright? So, we're going to talk about their structures later on when we talk about the specific hemoglobin variants. But for your information, hemoglobin F is of clinical importance in the following because of the following reasons: detection of fetal maternal contamination in cases of patients who have incompatible RH types. All right, so mother has RH neg, mother is RH neg, baby is RH positive. If the fetal hemoglobin is present in the patient's in the mother's serum or the mother's blood, then that means that the mother needs to be given ROGAM. All right. Another thing is that clinical importance for certain hemoglobinopathies. In certain cases, such as one Alexis mentioned earlier, in cases of thalassemia, the body compensates with the absence of alpha or complete absence of alpha chain production, alpha globin chain production. The body would produce HbF instead of HbA1. All right, so very good in that one. All right. Critical thinking, guys. I'm so proud of you. You guys are using your critical thinking caps now. Now, let's move on to the next thing that you need to remember. The primary site of hematopoiesis. This is actually a long. It has a long line of appearing in the board exams. All right. If you don't know this, you might as well again study at the very beginning of this lecture. Repeat the lecture again. If you forgot about it, you have to go back to our discussion early on. All right? Don't go into the exam without knowing the answer to this question, because if you don't know this, how much more about the other complicated concepts of hematology. All right? So, in adults, the primary site of hematopoiesis is in the bone marrow. All right? The primary site. Again, using the words against you. Primary site. All right? That doesn't mean that the body doesn't produce it on the other sides of the body. On the other sides of other organs, rather. So there might be a secondary site. It depends. What's the case of the patient? All right? Now, what is the importance of lymphoid tissues in hematopoiesis? Well, primary lymphoid organs are the site of maturation, while secondary lymphoid organ makes the lymphocytes immunocompetent. All right? So they mature in in the primary lymphoid organs. What are our primary lymphoid organs nga? Can anybody still remember our primary lymphoid organs? It's an immunology recall question. All right. Remember that immunology and hematology are intertwined with each other. You cannot take immunology without learning about hematology. Okay. So what are your primary lymphoid organs? Anybody? They might ask you a question about this one. Bone marrow in the thymus. Very good. Very good. All right. Okay. So you guys still have a good recall of your question. What about secondary lymphoid organs? One by one. Adrian, give me one.
Mucosal associated lymphoid tissue.
Bongga, yun kaagad ang sagot. All right. Anong the groin and the neck? My neck, my back, my blank, and my blank. Ayoko. Baka sabihin nagtuturo ako ng hindi maganda sa mga students. My neck, my back, my blank, and then my blank. Alright. The spleen. Alright.
Sir, tonsils po.
Yes, very good. But that's included also in MALT, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue.
No,
Alright.
sir.
Alright. Who else? Noreen Fortunato said something.
Lymph nodes, sir.
Very good. All right, so good. All right. Ayan na si si Sir Marco nagre-reply doon ng nanggigigil siya, nanggagalaiti siya. Nanggigigil siya. 'Di ba kakantahan ko kayo ng my neck, my back, my blank and my blank. Ikaw talaga Mayra ha. Si Mayra ba yun? Si Joanna? Joanna pala, sorry. Si Joanna. Sa groin daw. Ikaw talaga, Joanna, ha? Hindi to anatomy class. Sasakalin ka ni Sir Marco after ng lecture. Alright? Pag nagkita kayo face-to-face. Nagpe-face-to-face na sila, Sir Marco, no? Kamusta?
Just a few students, sir. Pero ano na lang, no comment na lang.
Ay, nako. Ay, nako. Okay. I'll give you guys a piece of advice. Take everything seriously when you're doing your face-to-face classes with Sir Marco. He's going to teach you the skills that you cannot get from the books. All right? You can't get this from books. Some students, they do horrible on exams. But there are certain cases when I used to teach. I used to be I'm not clinical instructor, but when I was working in MCU, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with MCU, Manila Central University. We always have a student who will be our partner. Every time we go on duty, we have an intern with us, especially when you're going up and down the hospital, doing certain procedures. That's the thing that you guys are missing. The thrill of working in a hospital is amazing. It's an amazing experience. Even if you're not going to pursue a career in medical technology, it's an amazing experience because you get to learn about doing procedures like phlebotomy, for instance. You get to know how to make your blood smears. And next week, next time we meet, I'm going to show you a video of a friend of mine I'm going to show you a video of a friend of mine who makes ideal blood smears because she's the one who actually has the textbook. I've been working for 6 years. I actually work at the hematology department right now in my current hospital, but I never have the opportunity to make an ideal smear. It's always subpar. But a friend of mine, I'll show you guys a video of a friend of mine who has what you call the very definition of textbook blood smear. All right. So I hope you guys will appreciate my friend's efforts because I'm going to videotape her. I'm going to take my camera to the hospital and I'm going to show you guys how she makes blood smears and other preparations in the clinical laboratory. All right. Anyway, what types of tissues are in the marrow? Where basically we have the marrow, the red marrow, and the yellow marrow. So the red marrow is the active marrow. The yellow marrow is your bulalo. All right? That's the reason why you love your bulalo. It's because it's made out of fat, a lot of fat, or what you call adipose tissue. It's also known as the inactive marrow. Why is it important? Because as we go along our discussion, you're going to remember the marrow ratio. All right? The hyper and the cellularity of the bone marrow. So you're going to see hypocellular. You're going to hear terms such as hypocellular marrow, hypercellular marrow, or an inactive bone marrow. All right? So if you see these terms come around, please refer to this slide because there are the two types. Because it basically talks about the type of marrow tissue that you're going to see in the bone marrow. All right? So what bones have an active marrow? Just remember RSVP. Okay? So if the question comes along something like this, which of the following bones have an active marrow, just refer to your RSVP shortcut. So RSVP stands for ribs, not the type of RSVP that you guys usually do when you're inviting someone to a party, but it's actually ribs, sternum, skull, scapula, vertebra, and your pelvic bones. All right? So that is your bone marrow. Those are the bone marrow. Those are the examples of marrow tissue. Bone marrows that have active marrow. Right? So sir, hindi ako pwedeng kumuha sa tibia ko. No, hindi ka pwede basta-basta kumuha sa tibia mo. Baka mamaya niyan may makita ko estudyante gumawa ng ganon ha. May magsabi mamaya niyan sa exam nila, sa mga questions nila. Sir, pero sa bone marrow naman kasi ang hematopoeisis. Sige, pwede akong kumuha sa tibula ko at sa fibula ko. Ganon. Hindi pwedeng ganon. Hindi pwedeng basta-basta ganon. You need to rely on on what is written in the books. Okay? What's written in the books is RSVP. Ribs, sternum, skull, scapula, vertebra, and your pelvic bones. Alright? RSVP. Again, it's another mnemonic for you guys to remember it easily. Alright? Next. Differentiate the bone marrow of an adult and a child. Well, basically, for adults, there's 50% marrow, 50% yellow marrow. Somewhere around that line. But for children, it's a little bit thicker, or I would say thicker, or a little bit redder. The bone marrow of children is 100%, has 100% cellularity, or red marrow. All right. So for adults, it's 50-50. Okay. For children, it's 100% red marrow, especially when they're newborns. All right. That's the reason why when you look at children, when you look at kids at the age of probably around 1 to 2 years old, they usually have a thicker skull because their marrow, as well as trying to protect the kid's brain, of course, is an active site of hematopoiesis. Why? Because children are just born. It's like buying a cell phone, right? There's nothing there yet, or you still need to download certain apps. So that's basically my analogy in this particular context. That children are like actively producing red blood cells, and therefore they have a much more hypercellular marrow as opposed to adults, where 50% is yellow marrow, whilst the other 50 or the other half is at around 50% also red marrow. Red marrow and yellow marrow. Alright? So please don't forget your bone marrow. Because in hematology, you are also expected to learn about concepts in the bone marrow. Alright? But we'll talk about that somewhere along the line, especially when we're talking about myelodysplastic syndromes. Alright? Now, what is the term used for the numerical comparison between granulocytic precursors and the erythrocytic precursors? This is what you call the ME ratio. Alright? Don't forget, you have the marrow cellularity characteristics as well as the ME ratio. Alright? So that there's two different concepts that you need to remember when you're studying the bone marrow. Alright? ME ratio and the marrow cellularity. Right? Those are two different concepts. Please do not interchange them. So granulocytic precursors, all right, and erythrocytic precursors. Bakit, sir? Bakit kailangan naming malaman yan? Di ba pathologist lang yan? Because the reason being is that not only do you need to stain the cells, not only do you need to know these cells, you need to stain these cells in bone marrow films. But also, if you see them in stained bone marrow, if you see them in peripheral blood, that means that there is something wrong with the patient. Okay? You're not expected to see granulocytic or erythrocytic precursors outside the bone marrow. That's the reason why medical technologists, I'm manifesting it right now, that a lot of you will be medical technologists in the future. And you need to know that granulocytic and erythrocytic precursors should not be seen in the peripheral blood. So there's 2 points that you need to remember, okay? You need to know what it looks like when you stain the cells before you submit it for pathology review. Doesn't mean that you're going to diagnose the patient's it doesn't mean that you need to diagnose the patient's leukemia, the type of leukemia the patient has. No. We're going to do it more on the technical view. All right? So you're not diagnosing, but you're rather you want to know what the cells look like, because when you stain it, you have to know whether you overstained it or understained it, because there are several bone marrow procedures that you need to remember at the end of this lecture. All right? Or this lecture series. All right, so that's what do you mean by the normal value of the ME ratio? Sir, pati ba naman ang ME ratio meron? Yes. Yes, there's a normal ME ratio. And the normal value is 2:4:1. All right? 2:4:1. All right? It's a ratio, so you always put the a colon on the numbers, okay? All right? Clear? Clear ang concepts? Anybody has clarifications? Because we're going to move on to a different topic altogether, because we're going to talk about the yellow marrow. All right, so wala pang questions. All right, we're going to go again with the yellow marrow. All right, the yellow marrow is also known as the inactive marrow. It's capable of reverting back into active marrow in several cases. When the patient is suffering from excessive blood loss, or there is excessive blood cell destruction. Can you give me a case of where there is excessive blood cell destruction? I know both of these things refer to anemia, but what type of anemia results to excessive blood cell destruction? Can you give me an example? Anybody in the chat? All right, so anybody in the chat? Anybody knows? Excessive destruction. Both of these things, they're referring to anemia. I know my handwriting is not very good in using a mouse, but bear with me here. What type of anemia causes excessive blood cell destruction? You don't need to be specific. Yes, very good. Deandra actually answered the correct one at the very beginning. Okay, hemolytic anemias. AHA is also acceptable. It's because it's another form of hemolytic anemia. For you guys, for your information, AIHA stands for what? Francis, you said it.
Autoimmune hemolytic anemia.
All right, very good. Now, can you give me an example of a type of autoimmune hemolytic anemia? I know it's asking too much, but let's see if you know. Can you give me an example of an autoimmune hemolytic anemia? All right, wala na. Quiet na sila. Naging quiet na sila. I'll give you an example. Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. That's an example of an autoimmune hemolytic anemia, right? Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Actually, no. It's not an autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Sorry, scratch that. It's paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. It's because of biphasic antibodies in the patient's blood. Okay? So autoimmune hemolytic anemia, paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria, not paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria is related to the PIGA gene. So we're going to discuss that later on. But Thank you so much, Francis, for talking about that one. All right. Now, what specific part of the bone marrow is associated with hematopoiesis? Paulit-ulit na lang tayo sa bone marrow. Bakit ko ba siya pinapaulit-ulit? It's because you need to know also the hematopoietic cords. All right, the specific part of the bone marrow associated with hematopoiesis. So it's not just when you see the bone marrow, an example would be your long bones. Okay. And then, all right, site of hematopoiesis yan. You need to be specific. What specific part of that bone marrow? It's in the hematopoietic cords. All right? The hematopoietic tissue is actually separated from the central blood supply, but what you call the adventitial cells. Adventitial cells. All right? So, what do you call? We have the corpusa adventicula, which is basically a part of the hematopoietic cords. This is the part. This is the outside portion is your blood vessel, all right, and this is your corpusa adventicula, and within inside this one is what you call the hematopoietic cords, all right. Why do they call it cords? Because it looks like a string of cells, all right. So these strings of cells would release it in the corpusa adventicula, and it will go out of the peripheral blood, so PV, okay. So every cell that undergoes differentiation and maturation will come out here, all right, with the adventitial cells. So these are adventitial cells. They're separated by adventitial cells. Peripheral blood, basically it means that this outside part is the peripheral blood, right? Clear? Hindi na kailangan ulitin ko daw, sabi ni Joanna Baltar, magmula dun sa umpisa, Joanna. Ulitin daw, sabi ni Joanna. Okay lang, class, ulitin natin. Okay. At least kinlaro mo. Kasi I have the time, but I don't think Sir Marco has the time. Alright? Okay. So, precursor cells, the precursor cells that are present in the cords, usually they are near the adventicula or within the cords. If it's near the adventicula, or the adventicular surface, or adventitial surface, it's going to be the megakaryocytes and normoblasts. But if it's deep within the cords, it's granulocytic precursors. All right, so again, referring to the previous drawing, if it's within these cords, you're going to see a lot of granulocytic precursors. All right, so I'm going to use a pink one or a violet one. No, I want to select the orange one. So if it's in the orange area, if it's in the inner portions of the cords, it's granulocytic precursors. But if it's near here, near the corpusa adventicula, that's going to be either erythrocytic precursors or your megakaryocytic precursors. Why did I add megakaryocytic precursors or megakaryocytes? Why? Because they are the end products of megakaryocytic megakaryopoiesis is, of course, your platelets. Okay, platelets. Okay. So please don't forget. Okay. Now, after what stage of the myeloid series can be found deep within the cords? Well, actually, it's the metamyelocytic stage, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about RBC maturation later on. All right. Next, how does the precursor cell exit or go into the bone marrow? Exit and go into the bone marrow. Okay, so do they go into the bone marrow? Inside the bone marrow? Yes. There's a cell. What cell goes inside the bone marrow? Deep within the bone marrow. They go outside and they go in. B cells. Alright? B cells actually go in and out. Alright? Adventitial cells allow contact passage through the endothelial surface. The endothelial cells detect a specific receptor to allow passage into the blood vessels surrounding the cords. Now, we're going to talk about that later on, what specific receptors there are, but overall, it's a pretty straightforward interaction between the adventitial cells and the endothelial tissue. So, adventitial cells allow the passage of mature cells into the endothelial tissue, the endothelial surface. The endothelial surface detects a specific receptors to allow the passage into the blood vessels surrounding the cords. All right? So it's pretty straightforward. Adventitial cell, endothelial tissue, endothelial tissue with receptors allows it to either exit or enter in the bloodstream. All right, very easy. It's a pretty straightforward it's a pretty straightforward interaction between these three types of cells. All right. So let's talk about the microenvironment of the hematopoiesis. The hematopoietic microenvironment rather. It is important. The microenvironment is important because of what? Because it's important for stem cell differentiation and proliferation. All right. So what do I mean by the hematopoietic microenvironment? It's composed of cells within the bone marrow. All right. So there's several cells in this microenvironment. We have to talk about endothelial cells, adipocytes or adipose tissue. We have reticular cells or fibroblasts. We have macrophages and osteoblasts and osteoclasts. All of these are related to the bone marrow tissue. This one is actually just the bone forming cells or bone decreasing cells. All right, clasts and blasts. Osteoblasts add more structure to your bone marrow integrity, to your bone integrity. Osteoclasts diminish the number of bone integrity. All right. So they both function differently. The rest of the things here are pretty much associated with hematology. All right. What's important in the endothelial cells and hematopoietic environment? It regulates the flow of particles to the cords and into the hematopoietic spaces. That's the importance of endothelial cells. That's what I keep on mentioning here earlier in my lovely drawing here. All right. I know it looks strange if you just looked at it now, but earlier I had a discussion on it. So if you guys are rewatching it in the video on the YouTube in our YouTube video, just go back into when I started it. Okay. All right. Okay. So where were we? This one. Hematopoietic is composed of what cells? So these are the cells. Importance of endothelial cells in the hematopoietic microenvironment. It regulates the flow of particles to the cords and to the hematopoietic spaces. So the endothelial cells allow the entry of nutrients and exit of nutrients. So flow of particles. Alright? So that's the importance of endothelial cells. The importance of adipocytes is that they contain compounds that can affect erythropoiesis. Alright? Remember that your colony stimulating factors are basically just chemicals. They're just chemical signals. And they actually are stored in the adipocytes. Alright? Another reason why it's important is that they are going to provide and regulate the volume of the bone marrow. Okay? During erythropoiesis. It's important to have a specific number of cells in the bone marrow or a specific volume, because if there's no volume in adipocytes, there's no volume inside your bone marrow because of adipocytes, the cells will not be allowed to push out. There's a microenvironment inside, hence the term microenvironment. All right. Now, it contains the steroid compounds. All right. So that's the answer to our question earlier. So your stimulating factors are stored there, and when the body needs it, the adipocytes will be stimulated to release these steroid compounds. Because adipose tissue is composed of a lot of fat. Steroids are fat. Alright? Alright, so somebody is shouting in the chat, or somebody's watching a video. Who is that? It's a little bit distracting. What's that? Francis, ikaw ba yun? Nakita ko ikaw yung nag-unmute eh. Francis, you're watching Netflix. I know what video you're watching. Charis. All right? All right. Now, next. All right, next. What is the importance of adipocytes? So I've already mentioned it's a steroid. It contains a lot of those things. All right, so importance of macrophages in the hematopoietic microenvironment. Obviously, you need to have an immune cell in the macrophage, in the form of macrophages. in your hematopoietic environment. Why do we need it? Because you might get infections, right? So these cells are like babies. It's like the nursery of the whole body, or of your it's like the nursery of hematopoietic stem of hematopoietic cells. So these guys basically just serve as these guys basically serves as police enforcers. So hold on, are you a particle that that can potentially infect the cells? So if you look at the video, if you look at the anime, I don't know what's the Japanese term of the Japanese title of the game, but it's called Cells at Work. You'll see a lot of macrophages here and there. Whenever you see an episode of this uh, medically acclaimed anime. All right, so that's the importance of the macrophages. Aside from that, there's another importance, is that it is capable of releasing cytokines which actually affect hematopoiesis. Remember earlier that adipocytes are the ones that store the sterol compounds associated with erythropoiesis. These signals actually come from the stem cells, the macrophages. All right. So be mindful of those things. All right. So it not only is capable of phagocytizing foreign particles, but it is also capable of releasing cytokines, which serves as signals for hematopoietic activity. All right. Okay. Cool. Cool beans. All right. Let's move on, Joanna. Nothing else to add? All right. Let's move on. We have what you call stromal cells, which originate from fibroblasts or reticular tissues, and their function is basically to bind to progenitor cells. They bind to progenitor cells. Why do they need to bind? Because they have certain receptors that can stimulate the production of a specific type of cells. We are going to see that later when we talk about lymphopoiesis. All right? We're going to talk about them early on in the discussion. All right? So we have chemical modulators also in the cords. All right? We have a lot of chemicals in our matrix, in the extracellular matrix of the cords. What do I mean by the extracellular matrix? It's basically the, I'm not going to call it plasma, but rather the free spaces where fluid is present. So I'll within the fluid portion of the cords, if that makes sense, the non-cellular part of the cords, you're going to see a lot of chemicals. There's actually 7 of them, and all of these chemicals are adhesion molecules except for HSCs, except for proteoglycans. This is not an adhesion molecule. All of them, if you look at them carefully, the names of them, you're going to see them several times during our discussion, especially in our discussion for coagulation. All right? But for now, these are adhesion molecules except for proteoglycans. All right? Everything else, such as glycosaminoglycans, fibronectin, collagen, transpondin, hemonectin, and laminin, they are all adhesion molecules. Means that they are sticky substances. All right? Or sticky chemicals. The importance of proteoglycans, which are found in the bone marrow, it's capable of binding to stromal cells, to progenitor tissue. Okay, progenitor cells, non-stem cell progenitors. All right. So they bind to stromal cells, to progenitor cells. They are basically non-stromal in nature. Now, other organs involved in hematopoiesis, especially during the second trimester, is the liver. These are just added questions from previous exams. All right, this is the primary site of hematopoiesis during the second trimester. I just added it here for your information. All right. Another one is the contribution of the liver to hematopoiesis and blood metabolism. Well, not only does it produce cells during the hepatic phase, but it is also capable of sequestering damaged cells. What do I mean by sequestering? It separates damaged cells from the circulation. It destroys it. Okay, but there's a lot of macrophages there that's capable of culling and pitting cells. All right. It also reduces hemoglobin intermediates. Why? If you have hemoglobin intermediates, you are going to have what you call a disease known as porphyria. All right? There's a lot of terms for porphyria, but the basic concept is when there is an excessive amount of porphyrins, which are basically precursor molecules for the hemoglobin chain, you are going to have porphyria. All right? This is what you call the vampire disease. Another thing that is important that's an important function of the liver in terms of blood cell metabolism is conjugation of bilirubin. If you're going to look back in your clinical chemistry, there's always going to be a problem in the liver if it's associated with bilirubin. If the bilirubin levels are high, then that means that there's a problem with your RBC metabolism. Specifically, which one? The direct bilirubin or the indirect bilirubin? If the indirect bilirubin is high, anybody who wants to answer that one? It's a clinical chemistry question. Again, it's a must-know question. What is the elevated bilirubin? I'm not going to step into the lecture of chemistry because I'm going to leave that to your lecturer. But just for a review, what is going to be high? The direct bilirubin or indirect bilirubin? Which one is going to be high in cases of blood cell destruction? Gamitin na lang natin ang example ni Francis. Autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Which one would be expected to go high? Anybody?
B1 po.
B1. Tinatanong ko, ito talaga si Charis, ang ganda-ganda ng tanong ko, indirect at saka direct bilirubin eh. Hay nako, ayan na naman tayo. Listening guys, listening. Ano yan, Adrian? Why did you... I heard somebody said something earlier and indirect bilirubin. All right, very good. Nasanay po sa other name. Well, again, that's the conundrum of many students who study medical technology or medical laboratory science. You need to be familiarized with the other names as well. It doesn't only work in hematology, but it also works in different subjects. Bacteriology is one question. Yeah, bacteriology is one question. Okay? So be careful, Be careful when you're answering questions. ALT and AST has different names as well. So that is one of the pressures of studying medical technology. And if you survive it, means you're not just smart, you're also a diligent student, because it requires a certain level of dedication for you guys to understand and appreciate the subjects that you're given. All right? Okay, so these are the functions. Sequesters, produces hemoglobin intermediates, and conjugation. All right? Next, what hemoglobin intermediates are produced by enzymes in the liver. So I'm not going to go into the specifics because this is associated with production of this is associated with hemoglobin production. So just run through its porphyrins. All right? Okay? So, largest lymphoid organ that contributes to hematopoiesis. Again, this is again another question in previous board exams. I added it here. It's the spleen. It's the largest lymphoid organ, all right? Largest lymphoid organ that contributes to hematopoiesis. All right? Be careful with the words. The largest lymphoid organ. So which one is the largest lymphoid organ? How large is the thymus? How large is your bone marrow? Is the bone marrow considered as a lymphoid organ also? Only. Right? So the spleen is actually the largest. Okay? It supplies approximately 350 ml per minute. Its blood supply is 350 ml per unit. And luckily enough, I was able to, luckily for you guys, before I attended this lecture, a friend of mine has a kid. She has sickle cell disease. SCD, as well as thalassemia trait. I know she would consider her as probably the kid. You would consider the kid as probably the most unlucky person in the world, but in this part of the world, it's commonplace. All right, it's commonplace. Um, Primarily because of the culture of intermarriages between relatives. That's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why certain conditions like this occur. But it's pretty common here in this part of the world. Okay, if you know where I'm from, if you know where I'm delivering this lecture, you would know, because we do not want to say something that is racially biased. So I would just like to be safe on the safe side. All right, it's because of the culture. So the kid has sickle cell disease and thalassemia trait, and I was fascinated actually because she had hemoglobin levels of 6, and yet she is standing in front of me as if this normal value is normal. As if this hemoglobin value is normal, because apparently the body is smart enough to determine, okay, I can still function with this amount of hemoglobin and oxygenation. But you could see that there are symptoms of anemia. The patient exhibits pallor all over her extremities and even in her mucosal area. So I actually asked my friend, can I examine her for a while, because I know I'm going to deliver this class later, and I think this would be a fascinating story for my students. And if you look at her in her eyes, you're going to see nothing but white. You're going to see nothing but white also in the extremities. And from what I gathered during my interview with the parent, who is a friend of mine, is that they always allow the kid to play around, and whenever she exerts a lot of effort in childhood, and kids are often very annoying. They would go run around and do stuff that are they do stuff that what normal kids do. They just run around and they're basically big balls of energy. And what happens to her is that she has an off switch, apparently. Unlike other kids who are at her age, she normally would sit down automatically. You don't need to discipline her. You don't need to discipline her because she would catch her breath more often than not than the other kids, because she needs more oxygen. That's the reason why every time her father allows her to play outside, he would often remind him not to exert too much effort because you have a condition. So it's pretty normal in this side of the world to have those kinds of cases, and I find it extremely fascinating, especially when I looked at her blood smear. There's not a lot of sickle cells, and in cases where the oxygen saturation goes down, that's the time where the RBCs polymerizes and forms sickle cells, or what you call drepanocytes. Okay, so that's just something that I wanted to share with you guys. Hopefully, you get to appreciate how that's also one of the reasons why I asked you earlier. Have you thought about your blood earlier? So you might think that it was a strange question that I asked you guys earlier, but you are lucky enough to have normal RBCs, normal bone marrows. So please use it to your fullest potential. O, diba? Very inspirational and very very motherly. I know, right? So you guys have to be thankful for what you guys have, because not everybody is lucky enough to experience a childhood where they can play without limitations. All right? Anyway, that's just the reason why I talked about that is because when I touched her, I didn't actually examine her fully, but I wanted to know if the spleen is actually enlarged in these types of patients, and you can easily palpate the spleen on the side. And it was actually the father who told me, all right, touch this part of her body, because you're going to see not the sexual kind. Get your heads on the gutter. It's more of academic curiosities. All right. So I attached her upper right abdomen. All right. During my when I palpated it, there is an organ. You could easily see that there's an organ that is enlarged there, and usually what I would encounter in the hospital as I work during my whole practice, it's usually the liver that's enlarged, and you can palpate it. But in this case, it's in the upper left corner. Sorry, not the upper right quadrant. Not the upper right quadrant. It's the upper left quadrant. So I touched it. Oh my God, it's really enlarged, and you can actually feel it beating sometimes because the kid is having a sickle cell crisis. It's mild sickle cell crisis, according to some of the doctors here. All right, so be mindful of those kinds of things. We're lucky enough to have our organs intact and our RBCs at 100% activity, as opposed to some people. All right, so we have to talk about the spleen also, because it is one of the questions usually that's being asked in the exam. So you have three regions of the spleen. We have the marginal zones, the white pulp, and the red pulp. Okay, when you look at it in the histology, it would look like something. It would look something like this. AEB is basically when you look at the white pulp. Let's look at the gross anatomy of it first. The white pulp is the white areas here. I'm going to denote it by a marker there. All right. Okay. The red pulp is basically everything that's red, obviously. So the white pulp over there is basically white blood cells. All right, or hematopoietic stem cells. Right? And where do I find the marginal zones? The marginal zones is this one. All right. This is your marginal zones. Now, this is, of course, in high power field, but if you look at in oil immersion, you're going to see cells differentiate them. You're going to see cells well differentiated in this particular area. Okay? So that's a histological cross section of not a bone marrow, a spleen. All right? Now, what comprises of the white pulp of the splenic tissue? Well, of course, it has lymphatic nodules and, of course, what you call the lymphatic sheath. Okay? Or the para-arteriolar lymphatic sheath. So, the lymph fluid actually empties out on these white pulp areas, or the areas where there's white pulp. All right? Next, what are the cells found in the pulp tissue? Well, you're going to see in the lymphatic nodules, you're going to see both types of lymphocytes, B and T cells, macrophages, of course, and dendritic cells. And in the para-arteriolar region, you're going to see primarily B cells. All right? Para-arteriolar lymphatic sheaths are mainly composed of B cells. Now, speaking further about the para-arteriolar lymphatic sheaths, I know it's a mouthful. There's a germinal center. And within the center of this para-arteriolar lymphatic sheath, gosh, it's such a long word to say. It's such a long part to say. It's activated B cells. All right? So you're going to see basically everything there in the middle of the para-arteriolar lymphatic sheath is activated B cells. All right? Now, the red pulp is comprised of what you call splenic cords and sinusoids. All right? Splenic cords? May cords na naman, sir. Yes, there's also cords in the splenic, in the spleen. All right? So there's also cords there in the spleen. And the other name for splenic cords is basically the Billroth, or cords of Billroth. Okay? Right now, it's going to sound like I'm discussing things in the context of anatomy and physiology. You might have already encountered these terms when you've studied anatomy and physiology before in your second year or first year. I don't know what's the curriculum nowadays, but you might encounter these terminologies. But I have a specific reason why I'm discussing this. Okay, so the cells that are present in the splenic cords is, of course, macrophages and dendritic cells. So I think you, based on the line of questioning that I'm doing, you already know where I'm going here. The function of these cells obviously is to filter the blood. All right. So whenever there's macrophages or dendritic cells, you're going to expect something to be filtered or something to be cleansed. Okay? So every time you see a macrophage in the discussions that I'm going to talk about today, you're going to see splenic. You're going to see filtration when you hear the word macrophages and dendritic cells. All right. So it has something to do with immunity, or basically. All right. So what brings about the filtration process in the cords? Well, there's several. There's several conditions. If there's a decrease in blood flow, you need to decrease the blood flow for the spleen to actually filter the blood cells that comes to them. All right, and this basically results to reduced oxygen supply and decreased glucose. All right, now let's talk about the white pulp. This is the layer of the white pulp that surrounds the white pulp. Basically, it's the reticular area. That's the reason why you're going to see reticular cells there, and specialized B cells. So what do I mean by specialized B cells? They're either memory cells, or they are antibody. Specialized B cells are either memory B cells, or they are plasma cells. Okay, and macrophages. You're going to see macrophages there also. All right, now special functions that are done by the spleen, only by the spleen: culling and pitting. When it comes to RBC metabolism, they're the ones who actually cull and pit certain cellular material from microorganisms. From the cells. So culling is defined as the removal of nuclear material from organelles. Pitting is the removal of inclusion bodies or damaged cell membranes. So when you see a cell in the peripheral blood smear that looks like this is also referred to as a bite cell. It has undergone culling and pitting. All right? Now, in the blood, what is the only hematopoietic precursor cell from the RBC series that you can see in the peripheral blood? All right? So in the peripheral blood, what is the stage of the RBC series that you can see? All right? Medyo pangit pa yung question ko. Wait, let me It's the only nucleated RBC stage na lang in the peripheral blood that can be seen in the peripheral blood. Can anybody answer? Because the spleen is responsible for removing that particular part of that particular cell. Anybody knows? You can stain it with a supravital stain. Oh. Bigla silang naging quiet. Which stage? Alright, Noreen. Very good, Noreen. Alright, starting right now, I'm going to set a specific type of rule. When I'm asking a question and you have the answer, you have to introduce yourself, because I have two monitors here, and the slideshow goes here, and the live stream is on the other side. So when you guys are going to answer, please introduce yourself first. So, Sir Noreen po. Sir, my name is Noreen, and my answer is Liz. Okay ba yan? Pwede yan? It's okay, Noreen. It's okay, Noreen. Because it's okay. What you just starting right now. When you guys answer questions, you have to introduce yourself. Okay? All right. Okay ba 'yon, Adrian? Yeah. It's wala, yun yung namamas ko. Ano bang upcoming holiday? Ang pangit naman, nakiki-Easter po. Makiki-Easter po. Makiki-Easter po, ganon. Alright, so ganun tayo ngayon pag magsasagot kasi it's difficult. I'm doing a live stream on this monitor and this one for you guys. So please help me out. I need you guys to introduce yourself when you're answering the question, okay? Is that cool? Is everybody cool with that?
Yes po, sir.
Alright. Yes, aside from Adrian and Noreen, what about the other people? Baka mamaya marinig ko, makikita ko yung mukha ni Mayra eh. She is not having it. si Joanna. Okay. Alright. Let's move on. Okay lang. Okay lang, Rainiel. Hindi ka na ba sumasagot? Ewan ko sa'yo. Bahala ka dyan. Hindi ka na ba nagsasalita? Bahala ka dyan, Rainiel. Alright. Now, let's move on. Um, let's move on to what blood cells are stored in the spleen. Obviously, we store cells in the spleen. That's the reason why we have what we call splenic platelets, and then we also have peripheral blood platelets. Now, as I discuss, if we're going to discuss it, we're going to discuss it later, but there's basically a number that you can set on the amount of platelets that you can see in the peripheral blood and in the spleen. It's actually 1/4, 1/4 and 1/4 and 2/4. Tama ba? No. 1/4 and 3/4 of the platelets goes into 1/4 of the platelets is found in the peripheral blood, and the other 3/4 is seen in the spleen. All right. Next, immunoglobulin class that is produced by B cells in the germinal centers of the spleen is of course going to be IgM. Alright? So sir, ba't namin kailangan malaman? Kasi, sinabi ko nga sa inyo, the spleen is a site of hematopoiesis. This is what you call the splenic hematopoiesis. Alright? In certain cases, you're going to see patients with an enlarged spleen. Hence my story earlier. Now, this bean-shaped organ contributes to hematopoiesis. Basically, this is your lymph nodes. All right? Lymph nodes. Medyo malaki, medyo enlarged yung kulani ni ate kasi ano siya, very inflamed na siya. So she's probably having either a viral infection or something much more insidious. All right, so let's move on. The main function of the lymph nodes, again, inuulit ko, it might sound like I'm repeating review questions from your anatomy and physiology, but without these basic concepts, you will not be able to grasp them fully when we explain it to you. All right, so I'm just giving you guys a brief review of stuff that you might need to understand first before going on. Now, the function of the lymph nodes, basically the germinal layer, is responsible for the production of lymphocytes, immunoglobulin processing, and the filtration of particulate matter and foreign debris. Obviously, we know that already, but we need to go further and delve deeper. There are two layers, of course, of lymph nodes. There is what you call the follicular and the medullary lymph nodes. Okay, this is a cross section again of a lymph node. All right. So what you call the follicles are basically this portion here. If you look at it closely, I don't know if you can see it there. Please say so. You would see a shaded area here. You would see an almost shaded area. Within the circle, you're going to see another circle that's basically just a slight impression. Okay? It's almost like a slight impression. But to a person who is a histopathologist or an histologist, he would know that this is a follicle. And if you look at it closely, this is in the high power. This is basically, if you look at it at a glance, you would know that this is at a low power objective. But when you look at it closely, especially in the oil immersion, you're going to see a lot of follicular cells there. All right, hence the term lymphatic follicles. All right, and then within it, you're going to see the medulla. There's medullary cords, and of course the red stuff that you see here, these are just blood vessels. Okay, that's basic histology for you guys. Hopefully you have retained some knowledge of your histology class way back in your first year or second year, way back in your third years. Okay, so that is the cross section. This is basically the answer to the question. It's the cortex and the medulla. Now, B cell proliferation occurs in what part of the lymph node? As I mentioned before, the lymph nodes have different cells present within them, And inside the follicles, you're going to see B cells. Okay? And within within the follicles also, you're going to the B cells that within those the B cells within those follicles, you're going to see what do you call this? You're going to see B cell proliferation. All right? Okay, or the germinal layer or the foci. Okay, now let's talk about the cells that are predominant in the paracortex. In the paracortex, we're going to go back to our drawing. In the paracortex, or the paracortex is basically the outside layers of this one. All right, so the outside layers, you're going to see T lymphocytes. All right, T lymphocytes. Within the medulla, you're going to see, or the medullary cords, you're going to see plasma cells or B cells. Pero sir, bakit kanina sabi mo makikita tayo mga B cells sa follicles? Kasi magkakaroon lang sila ng B cell proliferation. Dadami lang sila dyan. Magpo-proliferate lang sila. So don't use my words against me. After they proliferate, they would go into the medulla. Okay? They would all go to the medulla. Alright? So wag pilosopo ha, class. Baka sabihin nyo, sir, you lying. I thought earlier you said that there's going to be, baka ganun mamaya si Adrian, bigla akong gaganunin ni Adrian, no? Sir, why are you lying to us? I thought you said earlier that the lymphatic follicles have B cells in it. Yes, I'm correct. But the B cell follicles, they go down to the medulla, all right? So they go down to the medulla, all right? And they become activated plasma cells, or they activate and they form plasma cells, of course. All right? So ganun na ganun yung accent. Na-imagine ko ganun na ganun yung accent ni Adrian kapag ka mag-question siya. Sabi sa akin ni Sir, why you lying? Gaganon siya. Very very urban yung accent ni Adrian kapag ka nagtanong siya sa akin ng question. Kaya na-imagine ko na I have this psychic connection with Adrian. Adrian, nandiyan ka pa ba? Nawala na ang aking moderator. Natatakot ako. Baka mamaya nagagalit na sa akin to. Kanina ko pa siya niloloko. Baka sabihin, bakit ganun ang accent na nai-imagine sa akin ni sir? Alright. Ganun talaga na-imagine kong accent. Yung accent mo kapag ka magtatanong ka, so why you lying? Ganon. Alright. Next. So the fluid portion of the blood that escapes to connective tissue is obviously what we call the lymph. And the characteristic of this fluid, or the lymph fluid that you're going to have, that we have, is of course is characterized as having no cells, specifically low RBC or no RBC content rather. Let me correct myself. There's no RBC content, and it has a low protein content as well. So when you look at it carefully, when you measure the specific gravity of this particular fluid, it's going to have some range within 1.005 to 1.0015 because of the low protein content. Okay? Now, it's a pyramid-shaped organ that contributes to hematopoiesis. So obviously, we know it as the thymus. The location of the organ is that it is in the anterior of the mediastinum. For humans, it's here in our mediastinum. All right. For cats, it's here, near their I don't know, in their larynx. All right. So be mindful of the location of the thymus. If you're not a cat, it's not going to be seen in your neck. It's going to be in your mediastinum. Bakit ang arte ni sir? Pwede namang sabihin sa upper chest na lang or sa chest cavity na lang. Remember class, anatomy tayo. Medyo may anatomy review tayo ha. So please don't be alarmed. Okay? The difference between the thymus gland of children and adults is that in adults it's smaller, but in children it's larger. All right? Yeah, it's larger in children. And the function of the thymus gland is basically to allow T lymphocytes for them to wait. So progenitor lymphocytes, to be specific. All right, they are considered as waiting zones. All right. Now, speaking of the thymus, there are two regions of the thymus. Again, they have the similar structures as of the spleen and lymph nodes. They have the cortex and the medulla. But the difference is that there is a pre-T cell in the cortex. Pre-T cell progenitors, okay? Pre-T cells, these are basically immature T cells. And in the medulla, you're going to see the mature forms, okay? What do I mean by pre-T cells? Why did I use it unmarked? Why did I say unmarked? Pre-T cells basically are lymphocytes in nature, but they lack the CD markers. All right? They need to be marked with a CD marker or a specific protein receptor outside them. And again, when we talk about lymphopoiesis, you're going to see what an unmarked T cell is. Basically, if it's unmarked, it will undergo apoptosis. All right? If they remain unmarked for a long period of time in the cortex, they're going to undergo apoptosis because the body would think that they are useless cells. Okay? Now, stem cells. We're going to talk about stem cells. There are two types of stem cells that give rise to blood cells. Obviously, we have what we call non-committed or undifferentiated stem cells and the multipotent or multipotential or committed stem cell lines. All right? So, I'll give you an example of an uncommitted or undifferentiated stem cell. Are you familiar with stem cell therapy, yung ginagamit ngayon? Usong-uso ngayon sa face ng mga patients natin who for dermatologic purposes. Yung narinig nyo ngayon yan, mauso. I remember before I left the Philippines, it was all the rage back then. Not stem cell implants, but rather stem cell facials. Yeah, you're familiar with that, Adrian? Actually, when I went back to the Philippines for the first time, it's one of the things that I wanted to do. It costs like 7,000 pesos. And then I realized that this is not actually human stem cells that they're using. It's actually plant stem cells. They say that it rejuvenates the face. And obviously, from what I look like right now, I have not been rejuvenated. I'm more or less haggard. The promise of these facials is that you do feel a little plump afterwards, but I think that's not primarily because of the stem cells that they use. Yes, Deandra, they use it as stem cell. There's what we call stem cell facials. They don't inject it. They open a vial of the stem cell, and then they would just apply it like a serum, right? So I have a lot of serums for my face. Here is one. All right. Yeah, there's a better rejuvenating agent na hindi na natin kailangan mag-experiment with stem cells because obviously if you put it in the surface, it's going to only interact if you reviewed your histology class. It's only going to interact with the corpus corneum. It's not going to reach down, and there's no possible way for it to reach down because it's already been keratinized. All right. So I felt a little bit duped when I did that. I honestly spent 7,000 pesos on something that I honestly know, but then I still tried it. So it was a nice experience. I would rather you just go with the chemical versions or serums because these things they're much better. Platelets are the platelet ones are better for me. I've tried it here when I worked here because I can see nurses from the dermatology clinic. They would ask us to centrifuge loads of patient citrated blood, and when I asked them, why do you keep asking us to centrifuge these vials of patient blood samples? Then I realized that they're using it for what you call the vampire therapy. They collect blood from the patients, and then they would apply the serum or no, the plasma, the platelet-rich plasma on the face, and that's actually much more effective. And I tried it, and look at me now, I look younger. Charot, char lang. All right, I tried it, and it does have certain certain benefits. Like I used to have a lot of acne scars, but the doctor said because of the growth factors, the cells underneath now produce more. Now sort of like um, removes the scarring and makes it much more even. O di ba? So yun yung importance ng understanding stem cells, dermatology. All right? So yon, committed and undifferentiated stem cells, they have not yet been stimulated to be whatever they want to be. They're just there just for the sake of being present. Okay? Undifferentiated, non-committed, okay? And we move on to multi-potential, and committed stem cells. These are the ones with a specific purpose, right? So when we say multi-potential, it's capable of forming different types of cellular progenitors. So doon na tayo pumapasok sa tinatawag natin na mga multipotent stem cells, multipotent hematopoietic stem cells. So when it says multipotential, it's still undetermined whether it will be a granulocytic precursor or a erythrocytic precursor or a megaloblastic precursor. So it's not yet sure what it wants. So in terms of analogy with humans, they're more or less in their teenage years and they're trying to discover themselves yet. So parang ganon yung analogy ko sa kanila. All right? So medyo na-understand did you guys understand what I just said? So undifferentiated, non-committed, they're still at their young phase, or they are senescent, or they're old but they cannot differentiate because there's no stimulation from the body. But this one, multipotential, they have the ability to form different types of cells. All right? Okay. Now let's move on. Hematopoietic stem cell theories. This one is something that you need to remember because this was asked in a question bank in the ASCP boards, in the ASCP certification exam. All right. So we have two types of stem cell theories. We have what you call the monophyletic and the polyphyletic theory. So monophyletic theory is defined as this: blood cells are derived from a single stem cell. They become pluripotent or pluripotential stem cells. Okay? Polyphyletic theory, each blood cell is derived from its own unique stem cell. All right? Okay. So how do we differentiate monophyletic theory from polyphyletic theory? So from the name itself, blood cells are derived from a single stem cell. Okay? This is what you call monophyletic. So this one is pluripotent. So it could be what? It could be an RBC precursor stem cell, and it will be only form RBC precursors. All right? But for polyphyletic, it is multipotential. Unique stem cell for hematologic tissue. This one, monophyletic theory, one type of cell, pluripotential. Straightforward. So for example, polyphyletic for hematopoietic stem cells, it could either go as an RBC, or it could either go as a granulocytic precursor, or it can go as either a megakaryocyte. Now, what was the question in ASCP? Now, a question in ASCP was that which of the following cell would be considered as a pluriphyletic stem cell? Oh, ayan na. So yung mga question, yung mga choices, an RBC, WBC, CFUGM, or megakaryocytes. The answer is of course CFUGM. Why? It's a pluripotential stem cell. Or it's a multipotential stem cell or polyphyletic. Alright? So baka mamaya malito kayo. What's the difference between monophyletic? Straightforward. One type of cell, it's an RBC, as an RBC hematopoietic stem cell. That's it. Polyphyletic, this is one stem cell can form different types of blood cell that is unique to either hematopoietic, that is unique to hematopoietic. So unique stem cell. So each blood cell is derived from a unique stem cell line. It's supposed to be unique stem cell line. Right? This one, a single stem cell. Okay? So please be mindful of the two terminologies. Okay? And you might encounter these two types of terminologies. So from the name itself, phyla. All right? Phyla. Are you familiar with your biological terms? Phylum Coenoriti, phylum Chenes, yung mga ganon. Phyla means classification. All right? Mono means one classification only. Single stem cell line. All right? Poly means many. Many classification of stem cell lines. So it can be classified as either RBC, WBC, or RBC, or R megakaryocytes. Okay? So cool? Do you understand the difference between do you understand the difference between the monophyletic theory and the polyphyletic theory? All right? You guys understand? Mayra? Charisse? All right? So walang nagsalita, so we can move on. All right. Now, what are the characteristics of stem cells? Well, if you were to look at the dermatology pamphlet that I was reading whilst I was pondering on getting the procedure that I asked, or the facial that I was going to get, you're going to get the same things. It's capable of self-renewal. It's capable of giving rise to progeny cells. In the pamphlet, it says it's capable of rejuvenating old cells. All right, and they can reconstitute the hematopoietic tissue of an irradiated host. All right, so this is what we call the last statement is what we call is if you are going to talk about it in transplantation medicine. Usually, this is in a discussion in your ISBB. If I'm going to be your last time we discussed what we call transplantation principles or cross-matching principles, and we talked about transplantation briefly. What usually happens is that when a host needs a specific transplant, okay, when a host needs a specific transplant, he needs to undergo radiation, specifically for stem cells. He needs to undergo radiation therapy first. Why? We need to destroy these stem cells. For example, a patient with leukemia. I don't know, any specific type of leukemia. This is the new fad right now, stem cell therapy. The patient needs to undergo leukemia, needs to undergo radiation therapy first. After radiation therapy, the patient is immunocompromised. Yes, I know. That's the time where the doctors will transplant stem cells from a donor. Okay, from a donor. And these stem cells will be embedded into the patient's active marrow. Select places around the active marrow. Alright? Then they will be stimulated by certain cofactors, either in the form of a drug or in a form of a serum or something. Okay? And this will stimulate the cells to produce new blood cells for that patient. It's actually a tedious process, but it does have some potential to be one of the frontiers in combating leukemia. Right? There's been a lot of survival rates for patients who've undergone radiation therapy and stem cell transplantation. Actually, one of the highlights of stem cell therapy, successful stem cell therapy, is curing patients of HIV. All right? Remember, patients who have HIV have an altered DNA. All right? The lymphocytes of these patients, especially the CD4 of the patients, they have altered DNA structures in the in their inside their bodies. And that's the reason why it's hard to create a vaccine for HIV. Okay? Because the memory cells, they will keep on proliferating, and within the cells, within the body, there are still there's still HIV viruses. Okay? Or HIV virions. The virions will reinfect the new cells, and then they would alter the structure of the genetic structure to form more HIV molecules or HIV virions. Okay? So that's why it's hard for doctors before to cure or to combat the HIV infections. But nowadays, with stem cell therapy, it has the potential to cure HIV fully. So you guys need to read certain I would rather you focus on hematology first, especially with what Sir Marco told me about your histopathology results. But it's an interesting point of research right now. Okay? Now, there are certain hematopoietic stem cell lineages. We have what we call the common lymphoid and the common myeloid. Alright? Now, bakit lymphoid and myeloid lang, sir? Saan manggagaling si RBC? Sa myeloid pa rin siya. Alright? What's the difference? When you stain it, actually, the lymphoid ones will stain bright blue, and the myeloid ones will be a mixture of blue and lavender. That's the basic definition. But when you look at it in the molecular biology standpoint, when you look at it in the molecular biology standpoint, the common lymphoid and the common myeloid is still considered as the standard hematopoietic stem cell lineages. Why? Because of the certain markers. All right, they have several markers, and although there are markers, we're not going to discuss them here because you guys are going to go crazy if I discuss all of them here. Because it's going to be like one PowerPoint. There's going to be 100 items there that you need to memorize, just to make sure that one is a lymphoid and one is a myeloid. Is of myeloid lineage. So don't worry about it. All you need to know is that there are two hematopoietic stem cell lines or lineages. All right, the common lymphoid and the common myeloid. Now, what is the possible fate of stem cells? Well, basically, there are two types of things that would happen to them. They will undergo self-renewal, they will undergo differentiation, and they will either go with apoptosis. Usually, apoptosis is when the body is actually designed to stop reproducing or to stop cellular division. At a certain point, there's what we call telomeres. These are protein caps that prevent the cells or the damage of genetic material, and as cells continue to divide, the length or the thickness of these telomeres, they decrease, and once they reach a certain number of differentiations or a certain number of cellular divisions, the body will immediately undergo what we call programmed cell death, which is basically what you call apoptosis. So, napakaganda ng design ng katawan natin. Hindi siya basta-basta mag-self-renew ng pauso na without regulating itself. If there is an absence of programmed cell death, then that is what we call a malignancy. Kaya nga pag nakita ninyo yung mga cancer cells natin, tinatawag silang immortal cells because they don't have the capacity to undergo programmed cell death. If cells lose the capacity to undergo cellular death or programmed cell death, they become malignant and they would go crazy and they would produce large numbers of themselves or differentiate into mutant forms of their original intent. Okay? or original product types. When I say product types, these are the final cell lines that you're going to see. It's either lymphocyte, lymphocyte, a neutrophil or any type of granulocyte, or a platelet or an RBC. So they go crazy and they go haywire if they do not undergo cell death. So that's why the body itself is designed in such a way that it's fascinating that everything needs to end at a certain point. Like for example, yung toxic girlfriend mo. Lagi kayo nag-aaway. At a certain time, ilang beses na kayo magbe-break, there is one point that you have to let go. Parang ganon. Diba? Diba? Diba, Rainiel?
Thank you po, sir.
Ganon. At a certain point, you have to let go of that particular relationship. Otherwise, it just goes crazy, similar to a malignancy. Okay? So okay po ba 'yon? Maganda yung analogy, no? Adrian, nakarelate? Nakarelate si Adrian. Nakarelate din si Eleanor. Okay, yes po daw eh. Nakarelate din si Eleanor. Alright. Yan na nga ba sinasabi ko eh. Well, that's the reason why I like discussing things to you guys, because you guys have a certain level of participation whenever things are related to what you're happening. I think the generation right now, they're not very much focused, or they're not very much they don't really care if it's not related to them. If, for example, we're discussing hematology, if we just keep on reading hematology concepts, you guys wouldn't care about it. And that's why I always put an analogy at the end, a real life analogy on certain things. So just to spice things up for you guys. Di ba? Nagustuhan niyo yung analogy. Ang ganda-ganda ng analogy, no, Noreen. Si Eleanor talaga agree. Agree. Mukhang merong pinagdaanan to si Eleanor na hindi magandang relationship. All right. Okay. So, at some point, Eleanor, at some point, Noreen, you have to let go. All right? Similar to apoptosis. Otherwise, it will go crazy, or they would term it haywire. O, diba? Ganon. So now, what are the two types of stem cell division? There's two types of stem cell division. This is what you call asymmetric and symmetric. Now, what do you mean by symmetric and asymmetric? Symmetric means that the differentiator, the cellular differentiation is going to happen. One stem cell product will form another stem cell product of the same type. So, for example, rubriblast will divide into a rubriblast. That's a symmetric division. Asymmetric is when it divides and differentiates into a different cell type, from rubriblast to metarubricite. Okay, that's the difference between symmetric and asymmetric. So it occurs also in stem cell division. All right. So I just needed you to understand that it could be symmetric, same type. It could be different. It could be asymmetric, same type but same line. All right. Okay. Now enumerate the two models of hematopoiesis. There's two types of hematopoietic models. We have what you call instructive and stochastic model. The most common and the most accepted is the instructive. All right? Because this one is the most studied right now. There are biochemical signals that determine the fate of stem cells. So there are the chemicals around the body instruct the cells or the stem cells to produce different stem cell types. When we go to the stochastic model, random differentiation occurs. It just so happens that I want one stem cell in the bone marrow said I want to be a granulocyte sometime, right? Randomly. And the other one says I want to be a lymphocyte sometime. I want to have my kids to be lymphocytes. Parang ganon. And it occurs at a constant rate. And this one has a lot of problems. When does it stop? Because again, it's constant. The only time that it will stop is when the organism dies, right? So it has a lot of loopholes into it. That's the reason why the instructive model is the much more accepted model. All right? Actually, the longer we discover, the more biochemical markers we discover, the more obsolete the stochastic model becomes. All right? So there are two types of there are two models of hindi siya model like hindi siya model like Tyra Banks. Wag masyadong pilosopo, guys. All right? All right. Now, let's move on to hematologists today. Hematologists today combine the two models, dividing them into the initial phase of hematopoiesis and the lineage phase of hematopoiesis using these two models. All right? Now, the initial phase of hematopoiesis is that it uses the stochastic model. What do I mean by the initial phase? At the very start, all right, stem cells will just keep on randomly producing until such time that the body itself is capable of producing some certain biochemical markers. And then when it goes to the lineage phase, it undergoes the instructive model. So those are the two types of hematopoietic models, and they combined it together. But again, the more biochemical markers we discover, the less likely we're going to believe in the stochastic model, because at some point we're going to discover maybe Francis or maybe Mayra or maybe Joanna Baltar will discover the signal that turns an undifferentiated, uncommitted stem cell to be the starting point of becoming a hematopoietic stem cell. Okay? Now, let's move on to stem cell phenotyping. The earliest stem cell marker that we've discovered as of now is CD34. All right? This is the earliest marker. So if you are going to be asked a question, this will appear. I am certain of this one. I'll use Adrian as an example because he's my moderator. Adrian is a lab technologist who works at a research facility. He used flow cytometry to detect the number or the percentage of cells in a certain sample using Ficol-Hypake solution. After centrifugation of the sample and harvesting of white blood cells, he ran the sample through a flow cytometer using different CD markers. The following are the results. Which of the following is considered to be the youngest? Or I would change it into something like this. The following characteristic of CD34 is as follows. Blah 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 blah. Which of the given the following percentages, what can you say about the youngest stem cell lines? Mga ganong questioning. All right? So I'm not going to ask you which of the following is the earliest stem cell marker. What I'm going to ask you is something similar to that particular question that I gave to you. All right? So I might ask you the youngest stem cell marker according to Adrian's result is or has the following characteristic. It has most, it has 34%, mga ganon based on the data that I'm going to present to you guys. All right? Now, the loss of stemness is marked by what CD marker? All right? They call it stemness. The loss of stemness, it means that it is going to be a committed stem cell, or it's going to be part of the common lineage lines. It's going to be the CD38 marker. All right? So the youngest, 34. The lost one, or the loss of stemness, is at 38. Again, which of the I could represent this again as another case presentation. All right? I could present it. Mayra is working as a research associate for her dissertation. She needs to know how much of stem cells have lost their ability or have lost their stemness. After she ran the sample, how many percent of the following? I would give blah blah blah. I would give percentages of certain CD markers, and then you're going to answer the question: how many percent? How many percent? How many percent of the stem cells are capable of differentiating? O, diba? Mga ganon. All right. So please be mindful of this one. I'm giving you sort of a can I give this some sort Sir Marco, can I call this a leakage? I don't think I would call it a leakage. I would call it like some sort of guide on how to answer the questions if they are presented if it is presented to them as this way, right? It's not a leakage, right? Hindi siya leakage, 'di ba? Parang clue lang siya kung paano kayo mag-iisip and paano nyo itatackle yung mga questions.
Makakalimutan naman din nila yan. So
oo. Alright. Diba? Ang evil talaga natin. Wait, evil laugh muna tayo together in symphony. Ay, hindi ako sinamahan ni Sir Marco. Medyo napahiya ako. Ayan na. Game. Ganon. So, ganun ang pag-answer ng questions. Again, it is an exercise for you guys to use what? Your critical thinking skills. Okay? Alright? It's going to be a Now, bakit ako nagtatanong ng mga questions na ganito? Hindi naman ako hematologist. As you can see, the practice of medical laboratory science is advancing at a very rapid rate. And these questions have appeared time and time again from 2014 up to the present in ASCP. And if you have prospects to work either in the United States or in the United Kingdom, you need to expect questions such as these. All right? You're expected to know these questions. You're going to expect you should not be uncomfortable answering questions like these. Otherwise, you are going to get either a mediocre score or worst case scenario, you're going to fail. Okay? So right now, I want you guys to think critically. All right? Now when we're talking about committed myeloid markers, CD markers, okay? We are going to look at CD33 and CD38. Okay? So, bakit ganon? Nandun na naman si CD38. Remember, CD38 is just a marker for the loss of stemness. It doesn't necessarily mean that it cannot have another marker aside from it. No. All right? Your cells, small as they might be, there is something smaller than the smallest of in the larger scale of things, or in an outsider's perspective, even the smallest things have something smaller that we can compare it to. So cells might be small, that you need a microscope to look at them, but there is something much more smaller. These are proteins. Okay, surface proteins are smaller. If you want to go smaller than a protein, you have to look at molecules. If you want to look at molecules smaller than the molecules, you have to go at the atomic level. If you want to go at the if you want to go smaller, there is the subatomic particles. If you want to go at the subatomic level, you have to go at the quarks. Okay, so you can't say that. All right, these cells have CD8. All right, they've lost their stem cells. No, the stem in the larger scale of things, a cell can have more than one CD marker. All right, so it could look something like this, like something that I'm drawing to you in front of you right now. Okay, so they can come concurrently with each other. All right. Now, let's talk about the lymphoid progenitors. Now, lymphoid progenitors, they will have CD10 and CD38 all together. Now, again, I might present it as a case presentation. Again, Rainiel is a lab assistant who works for a research facility, and they want to determine a drug that can work for the lymphoid for lymphomas. In order to do that, they need to know how many stem cells they can use, how many stem cell clones they have in a particular vat of sample. He ran an aliquot of the sample in the flow cytometer with the following data. Suppose that the accepted value is at 15%. How many lymphocyte stem cells or lymphocytic stem cell lines is needed by Reniel? Mga ganong mga question na gagawin ko sa inyo. Hindi yung basta-basta, okay class, these are the CD markers for, what are the CD markers for the lymphoid progenitor cells? No. I'm not going to ask that kind of question. All right? You're going to be expected to use your brains this time. And I have a feeling that Sir Marco would be grinning from ear to ear as you guys take your exams. Wait, insert evil laugh ulit.
Pwedeng mag-mute ng mic.
Wait lang, ito na yung evil laugh natin. 1, 2, 3. Alright? Ganon. Now, sabi ni Eleanor, grabe naman po. Why are we doing this? Are we just doing this just to make it harder for you guys? Unfortunately, the study of the medical technology practice. Unfortunately, yes. And unfortunately, the study of medical technology has gotten much more advanced prior to our days. So we were lucky enough to not be involved in the study of this one. I'm lucky enough that it wasn't asked in my exam. But as the years have gone by, they started asking these kinds of questions. So it may not be a question that have been presented during our time, but it has been asked time and time again in recent years. So be careful, okay? Ayan na tayo. Cytokines involved in hematopoiesis. Alright? So ito na yon. Guys, ito na yon. Cytokines involved in hematopoiesis. Ayan na naman si CSF at saka si SCF. Redeem yourself, Francis. I want you to redeem yourself. What does CSF and SCF mean? Where's Francis? Did he leave the class already? Was he so bummed out that he left the class because Sir Marco was disappointed? I don't think so. No. He's still here. Let me check. Oh yeah, he's not. Oh no, he's here. Francis. Where are you? Transcribe CSF and SCF for me. No. All right. Another student. CSF and SCF. Wala. All right. Nagugutom na ata mga students. All right, Noreen. You are the first person that I saw raise her hand. Okay. CSF and SCF. What?
Okay. Colony stimulating factor.
All right.
And SCF is stem cell factor.
All right. Very good. Very good. Very good. Stem cell factor, colony stimulating factor. What is the difference between the two? This one targets the multipotential stem cells. This one targets the pluripotential stem cells. All right? Based on the definitions that I gave you earlier, you would have understood what's the difference between the two. If you have not, just return to the video on just rewind the video from our previous discussions, and you're going to find out what's the difference. Okay? All right? Anyway, let's move on. What colony stimulating factor and interleukin is needed for megakaryocytic colony formation? Oh, this one is a common board exam question. That's the reason why I started with this one. I remember this one. It was a board exam. An ASCP question. So interleukin 3 and CSFG. Bakit CSFG? Colony stimulating factor G. Why colony stimulating factor granulocyte? Because Because there's only two types of common stem lines that we're looking for, right? If you look at the charts for your hematopoietic stem cell lines, you're going to see two sides. One for the myeloblasts and one for the one for not for the myeloblast, one for the granulocytes and one for the lymphocytes. If you look at the charts, everywhere you see a chart, you're going to see two sides. You're always going to see two sides. And in CSFG is one of those things that is included in those charts. Okay, so be mindful of that one. Interleukin 3. You're going to see interleukin 3 several times. Not just here in hematology, but also in immunology and serology. All right? Next, what's the common name for stem cell factor? It's actually known as the KIT ligand. All right? The receptor for the KIT ligand is what you call the c-KIT. All right? It's short for c-KIT. Why is it called c-KIT? It's a cell receptor for KIT, or the KIT ligand. All right? Be mindful of these two things because we're going to discuss hematopoiesis later on. All right? Next, what cells expresses SCF receptors? Well, basically these are your from the name itself, stem cell factors, right? So SCF receptors are present in every stem cell that is hematopoietic. All right? Every stem cell that is hematopoietic. Now, this is another cytokine that acts much earlier than SCF. This is known as the FIT3 ligand. All right? So there's a lot of things that you need to remember. All right? I know a lot of things that we need to remember. KIT ligand is another name for stem cell factor, or SCF. All right? It has a receptor that is known as c-KIT, located in the stem cells that it stimulates. All right? So KIT ligand is what? This is your stem cell. This is going to be c-KIT, or the KIT ligand. That's the KIT ligand. There's going to be a receptor here known as c-KIT. Okay? Why are they shaped like this? Because they function like a lock and key mechanism. Once the biochemical signal reaches this one, it can stimulate the cell to differentiate. Okay? Or to proliferate and differentiate. All right? Cool beans? All right? We can now move on to the next thing. Another cytokine that is a stem cell receptor that acts faster. That's a cytokine that acts much earlier than KIT ligand is your FIT3 ligand. It is responsible for the action. It has a hematopoietic action specific for T and B cell progenitor proliferation. All right? You're going to see this in immunology if they discuss the lymphopoiesis. All right? Now, interleukin that is considered as a multi-lineage stem cell factor. Multi-lineage stem cell factor. It's interleukin 3. Okay? Now, lineage-specific hematopoiesis. Lineage-specific. Illustrate erythropoiesis in a brief manner. So, I'm going to go with BFUE. What does BFUE mean? May pasalubong ako. Makakakuha ng pasalubong sa akin ang makasagot ng ibig sabihin ng BFU. Sinabi ko yan kanina. Umpisang-umpisa pa lang. Alright. Oh my gosh. Talagang may pasalubong talaga sa akin si Adrian. Not because he answered this question, but because he is my moderator. Diba? Bongga, no? Diba? Reward din. Kasi I appreciate your efforts naman. So look at this one. Interleukin 3 is present. Right? What did we say about interleukin 3? Interleukin is what? A multi-lineage stem cell factor. All right? What is the other one that is needed? Erythropoietin. Okay? So with the stimulation of these two stem cell factors, it can become a pro-erythroblast. All right? Now, although it says red blood cell at the end, it's a summarized version. Of course, there's several stages a pro-erythroblast needs to go through before it becomes a red cell. Okay? So it's a summarized version because it's going to take us long. There's a separate topic for this one. It's going to take us a long time if I talk about it right now. Okay? Especially now that I'm hungry. I need breakfast, of course. Don't worry, we're about to finish hematopoiesis. Next one is the BFU. So I've already said, I think Adrian already said it. Now, how do we differentiate BFU and the progenitor cell after this one? The progenitor cell after this one is CFU gem. Okay? So CFU gem. What do you mean by CFU gem? Colony forming unit, granulocytic, erythrocytic, myelocytic, and monocytic precursor cells. So CFU gem. That's why it's called CFU gem. So if you go back, CSF, the cell here is CFU gem. Alright? CFU gem. Monocytic, myelocytic, and monocytic. Alright? So kaya siya gem. Now, BFU is transcribed as blast forming unit, erythrocyte. Okay? It comes after that one. And how do we differentiate the progenitors of BFU? Well, basically, if you look at it in the microscope, I know, we're going to look at it, sorry. Nasaan na ba ako? If you differentiate them both, the proliferative activity of BFU is that it has higher proliferation rate because it's the younger form. The younger the cell is, the more likely it is, the more cell division it can occur, the more cell division it can do. The older it is, the lesser cell division it can do, but it requires more stimulation, and therefore there's more receptors. Look at the chart here. BFU has higher proliferative activity as opposed to CFUE, colony forming unit E. Where's colony forming unit E? It's here in between these two things. All right. How much EPO receptors does it have? It has low concentrations of EPO receptors. Because of its high proliferative activity, it doesn't require that much biochemical signaling. But CFUE has more receptors because it's older. All right? It's older. Now, what is the shape of BFUE when studied in vitro? It is grape-like. All right? Grape-like. It's grape-like. It looks like that. Now, what cytokine is used as a signal? What cytokine signal for megakaryopoiesis? All right? So it requires again, ano yung pinaka-common? Interleukin 3. But this time, you need interleukin 11 and thrombopoietin. Diba? Ayan o, TPO, thrombopoietin. Now, let's look at it closely. We have colony forming unit megakaryocytes. All right? With the stimulation or the signaling of interleukin 3 and 11, it becomes a megakaryocyte. With TPO, it bursts and forms platelets. All right? Now, what is the special characteristic or morphological characteristic in the microscope of megakaryocytes? Can somebody give me a specific answer? What is the special what's the special morphological characteristic of a megakaryocyte when you view it in the microscope of a bone marrow film? Para specific ako. Among all of them, medyo urban na din yung accent ko. Among all them cells. All right? Anybody knows what's the difference? Or what's the special characteristics of megakaryocytes? When you look at them in the microscope, they're the only cells that has this type of characteristic in the bone marrow. Look at the drawing.
Multilobulated po.
Very good. Somebody said it already. The drawing, it's the multinuclear actually. And it's also one of these few cells in the bone marrow that's capable of nuclear division. Alright? So be mindful of that one. It might be asked as a question in your exams. Alright? It might be. Another name for TPO is, wait, ano ba yan? Ba't nagmo-move siya? Another name for TPO, my goodness. Alright. Dito na lang. Alright? Sorry. Thrombopoietin or what we call MPL ligand. Paulit-ulit. Ang dami naman, sir. MPL ligand, KIT ligand, FIT3 ligand. Yes, that's a lot. But again, memory work, guys. Kailangan na natin mag-start mag-memo plus. Alright? Especially kasi nag-evil laugh kami ni Sir Marco. Okay? Do you guys think it's unfair? I don't think so. Everybody goes through exams. It just so happens that it just so happens that people pass because they were diligent with their studies. Okay? Now, cytokine signaling for monocytes and neutrophil production. All right? So again, it's going to require interleukin 3. Why? Because it's a multi-lineage biochemical signal. That biochemical hematopoietic signal, rather. Why? Because it stimulates CFUGM. Okay? So it becomes either a monocyte or a monoblast. And again, meron na naman siya mga signaling proteins here. Alright? And I think it's pretty straightforward this time. GM, CSF. Alright? Granulocytic monocytic stem, CSF, colony stimulating factor, and then monocytic stimulating factor. Yeah. And then this one is granulocytic stem cell factor. Alright? Next, cytokines for eosinophils. So again, it's going to require interleukin 3. But this time, with the addition of interleukin 5. Now, in the exams, there was one question according to one of my students. Which of the following interleukins or cytokines is important in delayed hypersensitivity type 1? Diba? May mga ganong questions. Delayed hypersensitivity. In parasitic infections pala. Yun yung tinanong sa student ko. Then lumabas, puro interleukin. Interleukin 1, 2, 3, 5. Interleukin 1, 2, 3, 5. Do not answer interleukin 3, okay? In parasitic infections, it's interleukin 5. Why? Because it is for eosinophilic myeloblast formation. It stimulates eosinophilic myeloblast to become an eosinophil. Alright? So be mindful of that one. This one is one of the questions again from one of my students who took ASCP. Cytokine signals for basophils. It was phrased like this. Which of the following is seen in which of the following interleukins is of high concentrations in patients with type 1 hypersensitivity? Sabi, hello sir, paano ko sasagutin yon? Interleukin 3 and interleukin 4. If it's asking for a specific one, unique for anything related to basophilia, include interleukin 4. All right? Cool? That is the end of our discussion related to hematopoiesis. Did you guys? I hopefully the questions that I've given to you are insightful and have opened your minds in the wonderful world or the confusing world of hematopoiesis. Next thing that we're going to discuss is the maturation series after a short break. Sir Marco, can I give them an hour? Or
1 hour, yes.
okay.
1 hour.
All right. Okay, so I'll see you guys after an hour. Hopefully all of you guys have been have rested well, have eaten well, because again there's more memory work here. All right? And as I do and as you do that, I'm going to start making the exams. Di ba, sir?